My mother raised her champagne glass at my wedding and smiled at my younger sister instead of me. 10 years married, she said. Your sister knows how to keep a husband. The bride could learn from her. My father actually clapped. A few guests gave the polite little laughs people make when they know something is cruel but do not want to be the first person to admit it. Kayla smiled and lifted her glass. Her husband did not. Connor stared at her for a long second, pushed his chair back, and stood. Before anyone takes her advice, he said, ask her where she was last Friday. For about 3 seconds, I thought my brother-in-law had just announced at my wedding that my sister was having an affair. If you have ever had a family turn one of your happiest moments into a competition you never agreed to enter, you probably understand why I did not scream or throw anything. Stay with me, because what Connor exposed that night went back more than a decade. And if stories about families discovering that the person they underestimated was paying attention are your kind of thing, subscribe to the channel and keep listening. The ballroom seemed to shrink around me. 200 eyes would have been easier. We had about 120 guests, which meant I knew almost every face that had suddenly gone still. My aunt had stopped halfway through raising her glass. Daniel's best man was staring down at the table like the centerpiece had become fascinating. Somewhere near the dance floor, the music faded because our DJ had enough instincts to know that whatever was happening was not part of the program. Kayla's smile vanished first. Connor, not here. My mother leaned toward him with the same expression she used when someone had committed a minor social error at Thanksgiving. This is not the time. My father was less subtle. Sit down, Connor. Connor did not sit. I looked at Daniel. My husband of less than 4 hours had gone completely still beside me. His hand, which had been resting on the table near mine, had stopped moving the second Connor said Friday. That told me more than his face did. He knew something. That realization hurt worse than my mother's toast. I set my champagne glass down carefully because my fingers had tightened around the stem. Music, I told the DJ. He blinked at me. Please keep the reception moving. Then I looked at Daniel. I need 2 minutes. Kayla started toward me. Sam, let me explain. No, it was not loud. It did not need to be. She stopped. My mother touched my elbow. Samantha, we should all go somewhere private before this gets blown out of proportion. I removed her hand. I'm already going somewhere private. With your family. With my husband. That distinction mattered to me more than I could explain at the time. I had spent most of my adult life being told that I was the difficult Harris daughter, because I did not believe family membership came with unlimited access. My mother called it shutting people out. My father called it being stubborn. Kayla usually called it independence when she wanted to sound complimentary, and selfishness when she did not. At 38, I had stopped arguing about the label. I took Daniel's hand and walked out of my own ballroom, without running, crying, or looking back to see who was watching. Connor started after us, but I turned in the doorway. Give me a minute. He nodded. That was the first useful thing anyone in my family did that night. The hallway outside the ballroom was quiet enough that I could hear the muted bass from inside and the soft hum of the hotel's air conditioning. Daniel and I had toured that restored downtown Columbus hotel twice before booking it. I had loved the old brass fixtures and the tall windows and the fact that the ballroom felt elegant without feeling like we were pretending to belong to somebody else's tax bracket. We had paid for most of the wedding ourselves. That had been deliberate. I did not want anyone purchasing veto power over our decisions. Apparently, money was not the only way my family knew how to claim influence. I faced Daniel. What happened Friday? He rubbed one hand over his jaw. Kayla met me. There are answers that create more questions before you have even finished hearing them. Met you where? At the lounge near the hotel Friday afternoon. My stomach tightened. Why? She said there was something about your old engagement I needed to know before Sunday. And you went? Yes. How long? Maybe 20 minutes. I stared at him. Daniel was 39 years old, a civil engineering project manager who spent his working life dealing with contractors, budgets, schedules, and people trying to make their emergencies become his emergencies. He was not gullible. He was not intimidated by my family. That was one of the reasons I loved him. So if Kayla had gotten him into a meeting 2 days before our wedding, she had given him a reason that sounded credible. What did she tell you? His eyes shifted toward the ballroom doors. I caught it immediately. No. Don't summarize this into something easier because we're standing in a hallway. I wasn't going to. Then tell me. He took a breath. I will. All of it. But not in 5 minutes. While your entire reception is waiting for us. The reasonable part of me understood him. The furious part wanted to demand his phone, read every message, drag Kayla into a room, and ask my parents exactly how much they knew. Instead, I asked the question that mattered more. Why am I hearing about this from Connor? Daniel's expression changed. That was enough. You were going to wait. I was going to tell you after the wedding. I laughed once, without humor. Of course you were. Sam. No. Don't give me the version where you were protecting me. His shoulders dropped slightly. I thought telling you 48 hours before the wedding would let Kayla ruin the weekend whether what she said was true or not. And you decided that for me? Yes. At least he did not hide behind semantics. I looked through the narrow glass panel in the ballroom doors. People were moving again. Our wedding coordinator had apparently convinced the DJ to start something upbeat. A few couples had stepped onto the dance floor, mostly because guests will do almost anything when someone gives them permission to pretend an uncomfortable moment is over. This is not finished, I told Daniel. I know. After the reception, you show me everything. Messages, the meeting. Exactly what she said. No editing because you think something will hurt me. All right. And don't delete anything. I haven't. I nodded. Then I did something that surprised even me. I went back to my wedding. My mother intercepted us within seconds. There you are. We need to get everyone together and clear this up. No, we don't. Her lips tightened. People are talking. They were talking before I left. Connor made it sound terrible. I looked past her at Kayla. My sister stood beside our table with her arms folded, her face pale but composed. She had recovered quickly. Kayla always did well once she knew which version of events she wanted to sell. He's angry, she said. That's all. At you? It's between Connor and me. Then keep it between you and Connor. She blinked. My father stepped in. Sam. Nobody wants this following you through the whole reception. Then stop following me through the reception. Daniel put a hand lightly against my back, not steering me, just there. That mattered too. I had spent enough years being described as someone who walked away from conflict that I knew exactly how this would be retold if I disappeared upstairs. Samantha got upset. Samantha stormed out. Samantha ruined her own wedding because she could not take a joke. I was not giving them that story. Our first dance had been delayed. I told the coordinator we were ready. Daniel and I walked onto the dance floor, while my mother stared at me as if continuing my own wedding were somehow an act of defiance against her. Maybe it was. The first 30 seconds felt strange. I was aware of every whisper at every table. Then Daniel put his hand at my waist and said quietly, "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." "No, you want to." I looked at him. There was a difference, and he knew me well enough to insist on it. "I want to." So we danced. We cut the cake. I talked to Daniel's aunt from Cincinnati. I hugged a college friend I had not seen in almost a year. I danced with my father when the scheduled parent dance came up, though neither of us mentioned my mother's toast. Craig had always been talented at behaving, as if silence could erase whatever had happened 5 minutes earlier. At one point, he leaned toward me and said, "Your mother meant it as a compliment to both of you." I looked at him. "Explain the compliment to me." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. That is what I thought. I walked back to Daniel. I had learned to do that years earlier. Not the part where I returned to Daniel. The leaving. One Thanksgiving, my mother had spent 10 minutes praising Kayla for understanding compromise because she and Connor had changed their holiday plans for his family. Then she had looked at me and said, "This is why relationships require flexibility, Samantha." I had put down my fork. "Mom, stop comparing us." She had waved a hand. "I'm not comparing. I'm making an observation. You've made it." Stop. 5 minutes later, she did it again. So I stood, got my coat, kissed my father on the cheek, and left. Kayla later told me I always walked away when things got uncomfortable. I thought of that briefly as I crossed the ballroom now. She had never understood that staying in a room did not automatically make someone mature, and leaving it did not automatically make someone afraid. Sometimes the smartest thing you could do was choose which conversations deserved another minute of your life. Near the end of the reception, my mother tried one more time. "We'll talk after your honeymoon," she said. "And don't forget about that spare key." I stared at her. That morning, while hairspray and makeup brushes covered every surface in the bridal suite, she had casually asked when Daniel and I were giving her a spare key to our townhouse. "For emergencies," she had said. I had answered, "We'll talk about it later." At the time, it had barely registered. My mother had always treated access as something family received automatically. A key, a schedule, a confidence, an opinion about a decision she had not been invited into. Standing there after she had publicly told me I should learn marriage from the daughter who had apparently met my groom behind my back, the request felt different. "We'll see," I said. Linda frowned. "It's just a key." I smiled faintly. "Then it shouldn't matter." Before she could answer, I walked away. The last guests began leaving around midnight. Daniel's friends loaded gifts into the secure room the hotel had set aside for us. My feet hurt. Half the pins had come loose from my hair. I was exhausted enough that anger had settled into something colder and more useful. Connor was waiting near the foyer. He looked terrible. "I owe you an apology," he said. "For what?" "The timing. You could have told me yesterday." I tried to make Kayla do that. My attention sharpened. Connor glanced toward the ballroom, where Kayla was talking to my mother. Friday night, Daniel contacted me. Saturday morning, I confronted Kayla. She admitted she met him. I looked at Daniel. He nodded. Connor continued. "I told her she needed to tell you before the wedding. She said she would. Clearly she didn't. Your mother and father got involved." I felt something inside me go very still. "How?" "They said the day before your wedding wasn't the time to drop something like that on you. Your mom wanted everyone to wait until Monday." "Everyone?" "Me, Kayla, your parents. And you agreed." His jaw tightened. "Eventually. I told them I would wait if nobody used Kayla or our marriage to make some point about you during the wedding. I was very specific about that. I thought about my mother's raised glass. 10 years married. Your sister knows how to keep a husband. The bride could learn from her." Then I remembered my father's hands coming together in applause. "Both of my parents knew?" Connor met my eyes. "Yes. Before tonight. Yes. My mother had not discovered a family scandal while giving an unfortunate toast. My father had not innocently applauded a comparison that happened to become embarrassing 30 seconds later. They had known. And they had done it anyway." "Do you have that conversation in writing?" I asked. "Some of it. Group texts from Saturday." "Keep them." Connor looked almost relieved by the practicality of the request. "I will." Kayla had noticed us by then. She started across the foyer. "Connor." He turned. Her eyes moved to me. "Can we please stop doing this here?" I studied my sister for a moment. Kayla and I had never looked especially alike. I was taller. She had our mother's softer features. But growing up, people always called us close because we could finish the same family stories. And because neither of us had another sibling. There were years when I had believed closeness meant knowing someone's habits. That night I began to understand how different that was from knowing what they were capable of. "I'm not doing anything here," I said. "You're interrogating my husband." I asked him whether my parents knew you met mine. Her face changed just enough. Note shock, calculation. That was what I remembered later. "I was trying to help," she said. "Then helping can wait until tomorrow." "Sam?" "No." For the second time that night, one word stopped her. Daniel and I went upstairs. By the time the door to our hotel room closed behind us, it was after midnight. My dress suddenly felt too heavy. I kicked off my shoes, sat at the small table near the window, and held out my hand. "Phone." Daniel gave it to me. There was no argument. He opened the thread himself. Kayla's first message had arrived Thursday afternoon. There are things Samantha hasn't told you about her last engagement. Daniel had answered that if something concerned me, Kayla should talk to me. Her next message said she intended to, but that he deserved to understand what he was walking into before Sunday. The rest arranged a short meeting Friday afternoon. No flirting. No secret declarations. No affair. In some ways, what I read was worse. Kayla had presented herself as a concerned sister reluctantly sharing an unpleasant truth. Daniel sat across from me while I read. She started with Evan, he said. She asked how much you had told me about him. What did you say? That I knew you had been engaged and that it ended badly. I told her the rest was your business. I kept reading. What happened at the meeting? She said you have a pattern. I looked up. What pattern? She said when relationships become serious, you start creating distance. That you hide major decisions until you've already made them. That when somebody needs more from you, you start looking for a way out. Something cold moved down my arms. Daniel saw it. What? I did not answer immediately. 11 years earlier, I had been 27 years old, standing in an apartment filled with unopened wedding gifts while Evan Cole told me he could not marry me. I had demanded to know why. He had given me a list of things I recognized and things I did not. I worked too much. Sometimes I made decisions before talking them through. I went quiet when I was angry. Those parts had been true. Then he had said something that stayed with me long after I stopped missing him. You always keep one foot near the door. For years, I had treated that sentence like a diagnosis. Maybe that was why my relationships failed. Maybe I really did not know how to stay. I looked back at Daniel. What exact words did Kayla use? He thought for a moment. She said you always need an exit. The room went quiet. The phrase was not identical. It did not need to be. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them. Daniel leaned forward. Sam? I pushed his phone back across the table. You should have told me Friday. I know. You do not protect me by deciding which truth I can handle. I know that now. I studied him, waiting for the explanation, the defense, the version where good intentions erased a bad decision. He did not offer one. I was wrong, he said. That was enough for tonight. Not forgiveness, not resolution. Enough. I looked toward the window, where downtown Columbus had gone mostly dark beneath us, and for the first time since Connor stood up, I stopped thinking about what Kayla had done 2 days earlier. I started thinking about what she might have done 11 years ago. Daniel had told me Kayla believed I always needed an exit. Evan had once believed almost the same thing. Until that night, I had assumed the thought belonged to him. For the first time, I wondered who had given it to him. I did not sleep much that night. Daniel did not either. We lay beside each other in a hotel bed that was supposed to mark the beginning of our marriage, both of us staring into the dark while the city moved quietly beyond the windows. I was angry with Kayla, angry with my parents, and still angry with Daniel for waiting 2 days to tell me what had happened. But underneath all of that was a question I could not put back where it had been. Evan had once described me as someone who kept one foot near the door. Kayla had told Daniel I always needed an exit. The wording was different enough that I could not call it proof, but the idea was too familiar to ignore. I refused to turn a resemblance into a conspiracy just because I was hurt. That was exactly how families like mine created trouble in the first place. Someone had a feeling. Someone else supplied a story. And by the time the story reached the third person, it had somehow become fact. So before Daniel finally fell asleep, I asked him to go over the meeting one more time. Not what he thought Kayla meant. Not what he believed she was trying to accomplish. I wanted what he actually remembered hearing. He told me she had said I became distant when relationships required more from me. She had said I made important decisions privately and expected the person beside me to adjust afterward. She had told him my first engagement had not ended because Evan suddenly changed his mind. According to Kayla, Evan had finally understood how Samantha handles commitment. What does that mean? I asked. I asked her the same thing. And she said you like knowing you can leave. I stared at the ceiling. Did she say Evan told her that? No. She made it sound like she knew it herself. That distinction mattered. I filed it away without deciding what it meant. By the time pale morning light reached the curtains, I was tired enough to feel hollow. Daniel got up first and started making coffee with the little machine on the counter. I watched him from the edge of the bed, still wearing one of his t-shirts because my wedding dress was hanging from the closet door like evidence from somebody else's life. We were supposed to drive to Hocking Hills that morning for a short mini-moon. 2 nights in a small cabin, hiking if we felt like it, doing absolutely nothing if we did not. My mother had already sent 3 messages before 7. The first asked whether I was awake. The second said we needed to talk before Daniel and I left town. The third said, "Please don't let Connor's behavior become the story of your wedding." I turned my phone face down. Daniel handed me coffee and sat across from me. "Do you want to cancel?" "No." "We can. I know. If you'd rather stay and deal with this, I won't be upset." That was the exact reason I did not cancel. My family had already taken enough space in the first 12 hours of my marriage. "We're going," I said. "If my mother thinks this requires an emergency meeting, she can survive being disappointed for 2 days. Daniel gave a tired half smile. "That's the woman I married." I shook my head. "Don't compliment me yet. I'm still mad at you." "I know. I mean it." "So do I." That helped more than another apology would have. He did not ask me to make his mistake easier for him. He did not tell me his intentions had been good. He had already admitted that keeping the meeting from me had been wrong, and now he let me stay angry without acting as if anger threatened our marriage. I took a sip of coffee. "There's something else." He waited. "If someone in my family ever comes to you with a concern about me again, you tell me." "Immediately." "Yes. Not after you've investigated it. Not after you've decided whether it's worth upsetting me." "Yes. And the same goes for me. If your mother calls me tomorrow and tells me you're secretly planning to move to Alaska, I don't have coffee with her first and decide whether you're emotionally ready to hear it. That seems fair. It sounds obvious when I say it out loud. A lot of rules do after somebody breaks them." I looked down at my cup. "I also know what I do when I feel mistrusted." Daniel leaned back. "I leave." "You don't always leave." "I don't mean physically." I searched for the right words. "I stop explaining. If someone has decided something ugly about me, part of me thinks, fine. Believe it. I'm not going to beg you to see me correctly. That isn't always a bad instinct. No, but it can become one." I thought about Evan. I had spent years telling myself I had preserved my dignity when our engagement ended. In many ways, I had. I had not begged him to stay. I had not promised to become smaller, easier, less ambitious. But I had also shut a door before I understood everything that had happened on the other side of it. "If you ever stop trusting me," I told Daniel, "I need you to say it while there is still a conversation to have." "I will. And I'll try not to turn every difficult question into proof that you're already halfway out." He reached across the table and took my hand. Nothing about that conversation was romantic in the way wedding stories usually define romance. There were no sweeping promises. We were 2 exhausted adults in a hotel room discussing the first serious mistake of our marriage before we had even opened our wedding gifts. Looking back, I think that conversation mattered more than half the vows we had said the day before. We drove south late that morning. Hocking Hills was close enough to Columbus that the trip did not feel like travel so much as escape. The city thinned into trees and hills, and with every mile my phone seemed less important. I muted the family group chat before we reached the cabin. Kayla had sent messages. Connor had not. My mother had sent more. My father had written one sentence. "Enjoy your marriage. We can sort this out later." For once, I agreed with him. The cabin was small and clean, with a porch facing the woods, and a kitchen barely large enough for 2 people to stand in without negotiating. Daniel carried our bags inside. I opened my suitcase on the bed and started unpacking automatically. He was holding one of my sweaters when he stopped. "Do you want this in the drawer or left in the bag?" "In the drawer." He put it there without comment. It should have been nothing. A normal question. But for some reason it pulled me straight back 11 years. I had been 27 when Evan and I were engaged. At that age, I believed competence could solve almost anything. If work became chaotic, I made a list. If money became tight, I adjusted a budget. If a decision frightened me, I researched it until fear became information. Those habits had built a good career, but I had not yet understood that people did not always want to be presented with a completed solution. 3 months before our wedding, my company had offered me a temporary assignment on a major account. It meant more travel for about 6 months and came with better visibility inside the company. I said yes before I told Evan. Not because I was planning to leave him. Not because I thought his opinion did not matter. I said yes because it was my job, and because, in my mind, 6 months of inconvenience did not threaten a lifetime together. When I told him over dinner, he stared at me for a few seconds before asking, "You already accepted?" "Yes." "When were you planning to discuss it with me?" "I am discussing it with you." "No, Samantha, you're informing me." At 27, I heard criticism and immediately started building a defense. "It doesn't change where we live. You'll be gone half the month. Not every month." "That isn't the point." "Then what is the point?" "The point is that we're getting married, and you made a decision that affects both of us like you were single." That landed harder than I admitted. Instead of saying that, I told him he was being dramatic. I can still remember his face after that. Not furious. Hurt. That was my part of what happened between us. It was real. And I was not going to erase it simply because I had learned Kayla might have interfered later. Standing in that cabin 11 years afterward, I ran my hand over the edge of my suitcase and understood why the memory had surfaced. Daniel had asked where I wanted a sweater. Evan had once wanted me to ask where a 6-month work assignment belonged in our shared life. Those were not the same thing, but they came from the same principle. "You disappeared for a second," Daniel said from behind me. "Old memory." "Bad one? Useful one." He waited until I turned around. "I did make Evan feel excluded sometimes," I said. "That's true." Daniel leaned against the dresser. "That doesn't make what Kayla did okay." "I know. And it doesn't mean whatever Evan decided was inevitable. I know that too." The fact that I could say both things without collapsing one into the other felt new. That evening we ate takeout on the porch because neither of us wanted to cook. My phone buzzed twice inside the cabin, then 5 times, then stopped. I left it there. We talked about ordinary things. The wedding cake Daniel had barely tasted, which Aunt had danced with the photographer by accident, whether we had enough coffee for the morning. At one point we laughed so hard about his best man's terrible speech that I forgot about Kayla for nearly 10 minutes. I needed those 10 minutes. The next morning, I finally looked at my phone. My mother's messages filled most of the screen. "Connor embarrassed all of us. Your sister was trying to protect you. Please do not make this bigger than it already is." Then there was a separate message from Craig. "Enjoy your trip. We can sort everything out when you get back." Kayla had sent the longest one. "Sam, I know you're angry. I should have handled Friday differently, but I was not trying to hurt you. Daniel is a good man, and I wanted to make sure he understood things that might affect him. I did the same thing I would hope someone would do for me. Connor had no right to humiliate me publicly because he disagreed with how I handled it. Please don't let him turn this into something it wasn't." I read it twice. There was something revealing about the language. Not I was wrong. Not I should never have gone behind your back. She was sorry about how she handled Friday. She was sorry Connor embarrassed her. She believed the problem was presentation. I saved screenshots of the message and Daniel's original thread with her into a folder on my phone. I did not yet know whether I would ever need them, but I had spent enough of my career managing operational disputes to know that memory became less reliable the more emotional people became. Facts were easier to deal with when you preserved them before anyone started editing. Daniel came in from the porch carrying 2 mugs. "What are you doing?" "Saving messages." "Planning a prosecution?" "No." I locked my phone. "I'm preventing future amnesia." He handed me coffee. "What do you want from them?" he asked. It was a harder question than I expected. An apology would have been easy to say, but I did not want Kayla to apologize for making me angry if she still believed meeting Daniel had been justified. I did not want my mother to say she regretted the toast if she still thought the comparison was true. I did not want my father to tell everyone to move on while nobody admitted what we were moving on from. "I want facts before I want an apology," I said. Daniel nodded. "Where do you start?" With Evan, he did not react dramatically. That was one of the things I appreciated most about him. He did not ask whether speaking to an ex made me nervous or whether I still had feelings. He understood that Evan was not a romantic question. He was a source. I still waited until we were home. We drove back to Columbus Wednesday afternoon. By early evening, laundry was running downstairs and our wedding gifts were still stacked unopened against one wall of the townhouse. My mother had asked for a spare key to that house the morning of the wedding. 2 days earlier, the request had felt mildly annoying. Now I noticed it every time I passed the front door. I sat at my desk, with my laptop open, and searched for Evan. We had not spoken in years. There had been no dramatic falling out after the breakup. No periodic late-night messages. No attempts to reconnect. We had divided what needed dividing, told friends the wedding was canceled, and eventually disappeared from each other's lives with the efficiency of two people who had once planned to share everything. Finding his current contact information took less time than deciding what to write. I drafted 3 versions and deleted all of them. The first sounded accusatory. The second told him too much about Kayla and risked shaping his answer. The third asked whether he could call me, which felt unnecessarily ominous. Finally, I typed the only question I actually needed answered. Hi, Evan. I know this is unexpected. I need to ask you something about the months before we ended our engagement. Did anyone in my family contact you about me? I read it again. No mention of Kayla. No mention of Daniel. No suggestion of what answer I wanted. I sent it. Then I regretted sending it for about 5 minutes. Daniel found me in the kitchen pretending to organize wedding cards. You did it. Yes. Any answer? No. Then stop looking at your phone. I am not looking at my phone. He glanced at the phone in my hand. I put it on the counter. We opened gifts instead. A set of towels from my aunt. A coffee grinder from Daniel's coworkers. A serving bowl from people I barely knew but apparently now owed a thank you note. Normal married life objects began spreading across the dining table, and I found myself strangely grateful for them. By 10:30, Evan still had not replied. I told myself that was fine. He had a life. He did not owe me immediate access to a decade-old wound because my family had detonated something at my wedding. At 11, I showered. At 11:20, I turned off the kitchen lights. At 11:38, Daniel went upstairs while I checked the front door. My phone vibrated on the counter. For 1 second, I just looked at it. Then I picked it up. Evan's name was on the screen. His message contained 1 word. Yes. I read it twice, then a 3rd time, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something less important. 11 years earlier, I had asked Evan why he did not trust me. I had asked whether there was someone else. I had asked what I had done that made him believe our marriage would fail. There was one question I had never thought to ask. Who had been talking to him before he decided? At 11:42 that night, Evan answered the question I should have asked 11 years earlier. Yes, Evan and I agreed to talk the next morning. I chose a phone call instead of video because I did not want to spend the conversation studying his face for clues that might not mean anything. Daniel left for work before 8, and I shut myself inside the small room we used as a home office with a legal pad, a pen, and a cup of coffee I barely touched. I did not record the call. Evan had agreed to answer my questions, not to become evidence without his knowledge, and I was not going to start demanding honesty from other people while cutting corners of my own. When his name appeared on my screen, I let it ring twice before answering. His voice sounded older than the one I remembered, which should not have surprised me after 11 years, but it did. We exchanged the kind of polite questions 2 people ask when they once knew everything about each other, and now know almost nothing. He asked whether I was all right. I told him I had recently gotten married, and for a moment there was an awkward silence where both of us understood how strange it was that my new marriage had led me back to the wreckage of the old one. I don't want to reopen this just to blame you, I said. I need to understand where some of the things you believed about me came from. I figured that was why you contacted me. Yesterday you said someone in my family contacted you before we ended our engagement. Yes. Who? He was quiet long enough that I checked the screen to make sure the call had not dropped. Then he said, Kayla. I wrote her name on the legal pad even though I did not need to. Seeing it in ink made the answer feel less like suspicion and more like a fact I had to deal with. My sister had been 25 then. She had been dating Connor but was not yet married, and I remembered her being deeply involved in my wedding plans, asking about flowers and bridesmaid dresses, and pretending to hate every shade of green I showed her. When did she contact you? A few months before the wedding. I don't remember the exact date off the top of my head. How? Email first. Then we talked. What did the email say? Evan exhaled. The first line was something like, I love my sister, and I don't want to interfere, but I would want someone to tell me if I were in your position. I closed my eyes for a moment. That sounded exactly like Kayla. Not because I remembered hearing her say those words before, because it was the way she wrapped aggression in concern. She rarely walked through a door carrying a weapon. She arrived carrying a blanket and convinced everyone she was there because somebody might be cold. What was she telling you? She sent me a picture. What picture? You having dinner with a man? I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about the pressure building behind my ribs. That narrows down approximately nothing. I know that now. Who was he? I don't remember his name. He worked with you. That gave me enough to find the memory. My company had taken a small project team to dinner after closing a difficult account. There had been 6 of us around a long table. One of the men on the team, Aaron, had been sitting beside me. I remembered telling Kayla about that dinner because Aaron had accidentally ordered a dessert meant for 4 people and insisted we finish it. Were there other people in the photograph? Yes. I sat straighter. Then why did it look like I was having dinner alone with him? The version Kayla sent was tighter. You and him were the focus. Did she crop it? She didn't say she did. She said someone had sent it to her. That distinction mattered. I underlined the word picture on my pad. Did she tell you I was cheating? No. Did she say I was having an affair? No. What did she say? Evan took a moment before answering. She said she didn't know what the picture meant, but I deserved to see it before I married you. Of course she did. A direct lie could be disproved. A question could survive almost anything. What else? She said you were private about relationships, that you sometimes made big decisions without involving the person you were with. She mentioned the work assignment. I looked through the window toward the neighboring row of townhouses. 11 years earlier, that assignment had already been a sore spot between Evan and me. I had accepted it before discussing it with him. That part was true, and Kayla knew because I had complained to her after Evan and I argued. She told you I accepted the assignment without talking to you first. Yes, that happened. I know. She also knew we had fought about it. Yes. I stared at the notes in front of me. Kayla had not needed to create a fictional Samantha. She had taken the real one, selected the least flattering pieces, and arranged them until they looked like a warning. What else did she tell you about me? Evan hesitated. That you had ended other relationships suddenly. One college relationship. I know that too. Now. Yes. My pen pressed hard enough into the paper to leave a dent. Back then, what did you think? I thought she was confirming things I was already afraid of. That answer hurt because it made sense. I had expected anger to simplify the conversation. I wanted a clean line between what Kayla had invented and what Evan had believed. Instead, I found exactly the kind of mess people create in real life. He had already felt excluded by some of my decisions. Kayla gave those fears a larger meaning. She told me you always needed an exit, he said. I stopped writing. There it was. Not the exact sentence he had said when he ended our engagement, but close enough that I could finally see the bridge between them. You told me I kept one foot near the door. I remember. Was that your thought or hers? He was silent. Evan, I don't know anymore. I hated the answer, but I believed it. Memory did not preserve conversations like files in a cabinet. It mixed voices together. After 11 years, he could honestly remember the belief without knowing where the wording began. Do you still have the email? I don't know. Would you look? I can try. Don't send me something reconstructed from memory. If it's gone, tell me it's gone. I understand. I turned to a clean page. Why didn't you show it to me then? His answer came faster this time. Because I was ashamed. Of what? that I had listened. I waited. If I showed you the email, he continued, then I would have had to admit that I was taking advice about you from your sister instead of talking to you. I told myself I was verifying concerns I already had. But once I started looking at everything through that lens, every argument seemed like proof. I leaned back in my chair. So instead of showing me where the suspicion came from, you confronted me as if the suspicion itself were evidence. Yes, you asked me about Aaron. I did. And I told you it was a work dinner. Yes. You believed me? About the dinner eventually. Eventually. He did not argue. That was important because I remembered the conversation now. Evan had asked about Aaron without telling me why. I had assumed he was jealous because I traveled with male colleagues. I had gotten angry at being questioned about a completely ordinary dinner, and my anger had apparently looked defensive to him. Kayla had created a test I did not know I was taking. You understand that she manipulated you, I said. Yes, but I'm not going to tell you that means you had no choice. I know. You could have shown me the email. Yes. You could have said, your sister told me this, and I don't know what to believe. Yes. You didn't. No. I let the silence sit there because I did not need to punish him with more words. 11 years earlier, I had wanted Evan to admit that leaving me had been a mistake. Now I wanted something different. I wanted the truth to stay proportionate. Kayla had interfered. Evan had chosen not to trust me. Both could be true. I am sorry, he said. I believe you. That doesn't fix anything. No. I should have handled it differently. Yes. There was a strange relief in not rescuing him from his own apology. I did not tell him we had been young. I did not tell him everything happens for a reason. Those phrases usually exist to make regret easier for the person expressing it. Before we ended the call, I asked one last question. Did anyone else in my family talk to you? His pause was shorter this time. Yes. I gripped the pen. Who? Your parents. I felt my pulse jump, but forced myself not to race ahead. We'll come back to that. First find the email from Kayla, if you can. All right. And Evan? Yes? Thank you for answering. He gave a tired laugh. You were always better at hard conversations after you stopped being angry. I used to think leaving the conversation was the same thing. Sometimes you did leave. He was right. I did not like hearing it, but I had asked for honesty. After we hung up, I stayed at my desk for almost 20 minutes without moving. My body seemed to have delayed its reaction until the call was over. My jaw ached from clenching it, and when I finally stood, my knees felt weak enough that I had to put one hand on the desk. I was not mourning Evan. That surprised me. What hurt was realizing that one of the worst moments of my 20s had contained people I had never known were in the room. I had spent years analyzing my own behavior after that breakup. I had asked whether I was too independent, too private, too quick to solve things alone. Some of those questions had made me better. Others had made me suspicious of strengths I should never have apologized for. What I had never asked was whether somebody had been feeding Evan an interpretation of me while I was trying to defend myself against conclusions whose source I could not see. I texted Daniel that the call was over. He called during lunch. How bad? Kayla contacted him. He was quiet. You were right. I wasn't right. I was suspicious. Now I have an answer. What did she do? I summarized the call, including the photograph and the work assignment. Daniel swore under his breath when I told him about the picture. Don't, I said. Don't what? Turn her into a cartoon villain yet. She tried to sabotage your engagement. Yes, and Evan let her. Daniel understood the distinction immediately. Fair. She also talked to my parents. What did they say? I don't know yet. Did Evan? He said they talked. I'm waiting until I know what is documented and what is memory. Daniel was quiet for a second. Do you want me to come home? No. Are you sure? Yes. Finish your day. That answer would once have been proof, in my own mind, that I did not need anyone. The difference was that this time, I told him what I needed, rather than assuming he should know. I'll call if that changes, I added. All right. A few hours passed before Evan contacted me again. I had managed to answer emails, make lunch, and pretend for nearly an hour that I was capable of concentrating on work. At a little after 3, my phone buzzed with a message from him. Found it. Took a while. Sending the full thread. Another message followed. Some old image previews are broken, but the original attachment is still there. Then an email arrived. I stared at the subject line before opening it. It was ordinary enough to make me angry. Something you... The original date was from late summer of 2015. Kayla's name appeared in the sender field. I did not read the thread from Evan's forward first. I scrolled until I found the earliest message and started there. Hi, Evan. I hate doing this because Samantha is my sister and I love her. But if I were about to marry someone, I would want to know if there were things I wasn't seeing clearly. My skin prickled. Below that was the photograph. The image was wider than Evan had remembered. Aaron and I were seated beside each other, but 2 other coworkers were visible at the edge of the frame. The angle made it obvious there were more people at the table. Anyone who knew the context would have known it was not a romantic dinner. Kayla had known. I had told her about it. That hurt more than the crop. She had taken something I shared with her because she was my sister, and turned it into a question mark inside my engagement. The next paragraph was worse, because almost every sentence contained something true. Samantha doesn't always tell people when she is pulling away. She gets focused on work and starts making plans on her own. I don't know what the dinner means, and I'm not accusing her of anything. I just think you deserve to know who you're marrying before you make a permanent decision. I read it again. You deserve to know who you're marrying. There was no accusation I could isolate and call a lie. That was Kayla's talent. She arranged truth until it produced a false conclusion. Farther down the thread, Evan had replied that the photograph could be work-related. Kayla answered that it probably was, but then mentioned my travel assignment and an old college boyfriend I had stopped seeing after accepting an internship in another city. Then she wrote the sentence I had been waiting for. Samantha always needs a way out. She may not even realize she does it. He sat back. The room seemed very quiet. 11 years later, Kayla had told Daniel almost the same story. Not the same words. The same architecture. Private. Independent. Making decisions alone. Always needing an exit. I forwarded the thread to my personal evidence folder and saved the original email as well. Not because I had decided to expose anyone. I still did not know what I was going to do. But I knew one thing now. I had not imagined the pattern. I called Evan again. He answered quickly. I got it, I said. I'm sorry. I know. Seeing it now, I can't believe I didn't show you. You were already looking for confirmation? Yes. I looked at Kayla's email on my screen. She knew exactly what she was doing. I think so. Don't soften it for me. I'm not. Then tell me about my parents. There was a pause. I felt something dangerous then. Relief. For one irrational second, I thought surely my mother had said the dinner was harmless. Surely my father had told him I could be stubborn, but I was loyal. Maybe Evan had ignored them. Maybe that was why he carried so much shame. It would hurt, but it would restore one thing. My parents. I didn't leave you because of one email, Evan said. I knew Kayla could be dramatic. I wanted to hear from people who knew you better than anyone. My parents. Yes. What did you ask them? Whether I was missing something. Whether you had a pattern of making big decisions and then pulling away when people expected more from you. My hand tightened around the phone. And what did my mother say? She didn't tell me Kayla was wrong. I stood without realizing I was doing it. What did she say? She said you were very private. That sometimes you made major decisions on your own and didn't understand why other people took it personally. I walked to the window. And my father? I called him after that. What did he say? Evan exhaled slowly. Samantha, there is more in the email chain with your mother. You should read it yourself. I will. But you need to understand something first. I waited. Kayla made me suspicious, he said. Your parents made me think the suspicion was reasonable. For a moment I could not speak. 11 years earlier, my fiancé had gone looking for someone to tell him my sister was wrong. He had called my parents. and they had not defended me. "There's something else," Evan said quietly. "Kayla scared me, but she wasn't why I left." I closed my eyes. "Then who was?" His answer came without hesitation this time. "I called your parents." Evan's words stayed in my head after the call ended, but I did not let myself decide what they meant until I read the messages he had forwarded. That distinction had become important to me. For 11 years, other people had taken fragments of my life, attached meanings to them, and called the result truth. I was not going to answer that by doing the same thing. So, I went back to the beginning of the email chain and read what my mother had actually written. Evan's first message to Linda was painfully polite. He told her he was sorry to involve her, said he loved me, and explained that Kayla had raised concerns about whether I was truly ready to build a life with someone. He did not accuse me of cheating. He did not mention the photograph as proof of anything. He asked my mother a simple question. Was there something about the way I handled relationships that he should understand before we married? My mother could have ended it there. She could have told him that Kayla and I had spent our entire lives competing in ways neither of us always understood. She could have told him the dinner photograph was from work because I had told her about that dinner too. She could have said I was stubborn, private, ambitious, and sometimes terrible at asking for help, but none of those things meant I was secretly planning to leave him. Instead, she wrote, "Samantha has always been very private, sometimes too private. She tends to make decisions first and explain them afterward, and I know that can be hard for people who love her." Every word made my stomach tighten because every word could be defended. I was private. I had made decisions on my own. Evan had been hurt by that. Nothing in my mother's message was technically false. That was what made it effective. Farther down the thread, Evan asked whether I had ever ended a serious relationship suddenly. My mother answered with a story from college. When I was 21, I had been dating a man named Peter for less than a year when I was offered a summer internship in Chicago. I accepted it. Peter wanted me to stay in Ohio. I did not. We broke up a few weeks later. That was the entire story, as I remembered it. My mother's version was different without being invented. She wrote that I had accepted an internship in another city and ended the relationship shortly afterward because I had already decided where my life was going. I read the sentence 3 times. I had not left Peter because another city mattered more than he did. We had been young, the relationship was already strained, and he wanted a kind of commitment neither of us had earned yet. But stripped of those details, the story became another piece in a pattern. Samantha gets opportunities. Samantha makes decisions. Samantha leaves. It was the same construction Kayla had used. Not lies. Arrangement. I got up from my desk and walked into the kitchen because suddenly sitting still felt impossible. The townhouse was quiet. Daniel was at work, and sunlight was falling across the counter, where we had left a stack of unopened wedding cards. I poured myself water, drank half of it, then stood there holding the glass, while I tried to understand something that was harder to accept than a direct betrayal. My mother might not have thought she was betraying me at all. She may have thought she was being honest. That did not make it better. In some ways, it made it worse. If Linda had invented a lie, I could have dismissed the lie. What she had done instead was take her oldest interpretation of me and hand it to a frightened man as though it were objective family knowledge. Then she had gone on living with that interpretation for another decade. I returned to the computer and kept reading. Evan told her he worried that I was already preparing for a life that did not include him. My mother answered that she did not want to interfere between us, then immediately did exactly that. She wrote, "I don't think Samantha intends to hurt anyone. She just has a strong instinct to protect her independence, and sometimes she does not realize how that feels to the person beside her." I pushed my chair back. That sentence was almost elegant. It sounded loving, balanced, concerned. It also told Evan that his fear was not paranoia. His future mother-in-law had just confirmed that the woman he planned to marry possessed the exact tendency Kayla had warned him about. The evidence was not dramatic enough for a movie. There was no message saying, "Do not marry Samantha." No secret plan. No instruction to leave me. There was something far more believable. Permission to distrust me. I called Evan again. He answered after a few rings. You read it? Yes. I told you it wasn't what I remembered exactly. You remembered the effect. There was a pause. That's fair. I opened a blank document and began writing down only things I could distinguish clearly. Kayla's email existed. Linda's email existed. The photograph existed. Evan's memory of my father's phone call did not exist as a recording, and I refused to treat it as if it did. Tell me about my father again, I said. But I need you to separate what you remember from what you think he meant. Evan went quiet for a moment. All right. When did you call him? After I exchanged emails with your mom? I think the next day. What did you ask? Basically the same thing. Whether I was overreacting. And what do you remember him saying? I remember him telling me that if something felt wrong before a wedding, I shouldn't ignore it just because deposits had been paid and people were excited. I wrote that down, then added a note beside it. Evan's recollection, not documented. Anything else? He said marriage wouldn't fix doubts that were already there. That sounds like my father. I can't swear those were the exact words. Then I won't say they were. Evan exhaled. You really are treating this like an investigation. No. I'm treating it like something people are going to remember differently the second it becomes uncomfortable. He did not argue with that. I asked whether Craig had known Kayla was the original source of his concern. I told him your sister had said some things. Did you say Kayla? I believe I did. Believe? Yes. I don't want to tell you I'm certain when I'm not. That answer irritated me and reassured me at the same time. Fine. Samantha, there's something else you should understand. What? Neither of them told me to leave you. I know. I don't want you to hear me now and decide they ended our engagement. I haven't. That matters. It does. I looked at the notes on my screen. Kayla manipulated the information. My mother validated the pattern. My father, according to your memory, told you not to ignore the fear. And you still made the decision. Yes. That is what happened. Yes. For the first time since my wedding, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace, structure. People often think clarity makes pain smaller. It doesn't. It just tells you where the pain belongs. After we hung up, I opened a storage bin in the upstairs closet that I had not touched since Daniel and I moved into the townhouse. I knew exactly what was inside because some objects remain mapped in your mind even after you stop wanting them. Under old tax folders and photographs was a thin, cream-colored binder from the wedding Evan and I never had. I had almost thrown it away more than once. Instead, I had moved it through 3 apartments and finally into this house. Not because I still loved Evan, but because I hated the idea that I had to destroy something before I was allowed to be over it. Inside were copies of invitations that had never been mailed, a venue brochure, fabric samples, and lists written in my younger handwriting. I turned pages until I found a guest count and had the strange experience of seeing my current family arranged for a completely different future. Linda Harris, Craig Harris, Kayla Harris, plus Connor Blake. All 3 had been invited to stand close enough to watch me marry a man they already knew had doubts they had helped reinforce. Then I remembered what happened after he left. Not the breakup itself. My parents. Linda had come to my apartment carrying food I did not want. She sat beside me on the couch and rubbed my back while I stared at a television I had never turned on. Maybe this proves you weren't ready, she had said. At the time, I thought she was trying to help me stop blaming myself. Now the sentence sounded different. Craig had been even more practical. Better before the wedding than after, he told me. A divorce would have been worse. That was my father's answer to almost any damage that could no longer be reversed. Identify a hypothetical disaster that would have been worse. Then call the real one manageable. I had accepted both statements because I thought my parents knew only what I knew. They didn't. Even if they had not yet known exactly what Kayla had done when Evan first called them, at some point afterward, they learned more. I did not yet know when. That was the question I needed answered. The following morning, I texted Connor. I kept it simple. Do you still have the messages from Saturday when everyone agreed to wait until Monday? He responded 20 minutes later. Yes. I asked if he would send me the full section of the thread, rather than isolated screenshots. His answer came back quickly. I will. Give me a little time. I want to make sure I include enough context. That response told me something about Connor I had not appreciated before. He was angry at Kayla, but he was not trying to recruit me into his marriage. He did not send me 10 years of grievances or tell me what decision he was making about her. He sent only what I asked for. The screenshots arrived around lunch. The group thread included Connor, Kayla, Linda, and Craig. Connor's first message was directed at Kayla. You said you would tell Sam before the wedding. Kayla responded that she had not found the right time. Connor wrote that there was no right time because she had created the problem by going to Daniel in the first place. My mother entered next. Please. Samantha gets married tomorrow. Nobody is dropping this on her now. Connor replied. Then Kayla should not have met Daniel Friday. Linda answered. We cannot change that. We can choose not to destroy Sam's wedding weekend over it. There it was again. Protection through silence. Craig wrote that Monday was soon enough, and everyone needed to calm down. Kayla agreed. Connor did not immediately. Several messages later, he finally wrote something that made me sit completely still. Fine. Monday. But I am not sitting through anyone using our marriage to take another shot at Samantha. If that happens, I'm done keeping this quiet. My mother answered that no one planned to do that. Craig wrote, agreed. I stared at those two responses. Then I saw my mother again, standing beneath the ballroom lights with a champagne glass raised in her hand. 10 years married. Your sister knows how to keep a husband. The bride could learn from her. My father had clapped. They had not forgotten. They had not been surprised. My mother had agreed in writing less than a day earlier that Kayla's marriage would not be used against me while the truth remained hidden. Then she used it against me anyway. That changed something. Until then, I had been trying to decide whether the toast was ordinary family cruelty, colliding disastrously with a secret my parents happened to know. It was not. My mother had made a promise specifically designed to prevent that moment. Then she created the moment. I called Craig first, not Linda. My mother was faster verbally. She could transform a question into an argument before you realized you were no longer discussing the same thing. My father preferred short answers. If anyone was going to tell me the truth without forming a family defense first, I thought it might be him. He answered on the fourth ring. Hey, kiddo. I nearly laughed at the normality of it. Dad, I need to ask you 3 questions. His tone changed. About Sunday? About 2015. Silence. Did Evan call you before we ended our engagement? Another pause. Yes. The answer was so quick after 11 years of secrecy that I almost missed how important it was. Did you know Kayla had contacted him? Not at the time. I wrote the exact wording down. Not at the time. When did you know? He exhaled. Samantha. This was a long time ago. That isn't an answer. It was a horrible period for everyone. When did you know Kayla had contacted Evan? Your mother and I knew there had been conversations. When? I don't remember exact dates. Before or after Evan left me. He did not answer. I waited. Dad, I don't want to do this on the phone. You are willing to discuss my marriage on the phone with Evan. That is not fair. It is completely fair. He called you about me, and you answered him. I am asking what you knew. People were worried. Who? He sighed. You're turning this into something very black and white. That sentence told me I was not going to get more. At least not yet. All right, Sam. I'll ask you again when you're ready to answer the question I actually asked. Don't hang up angry. I'm not angry. I'm done with this conversation. There was a time when I would have stayed another 20 minutes just to prove I was not avoiding conflict. I did not anymore. I ended the call. My mother called less than 6 minutes later. I watched her name appear and almost smiled. Craig had done exactly what I expected. The moment the conversation threatened the family version of events, he had gone to Linda. I answered. What did you say to your father? She asked. Hello to you too. Samantha, he is extremely upset. He'll survive. You cannot start interrogating people about something that happened 11 years ago and expect everyone to remember every detail perfectly. I didn't ask for every detail. You called Evan. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Interesting. What? I didn't tell Dad that. Silence. It lasted less than a second, but I heard it. Then Linda changed direction. Evan has every reason to rewrite history now. He knows what happened to you was painful. He forwarded me your emails. Another silence. Longer this time. What emails? The ones where he asked whether Kayla was right about me. I never said Kayla was right. You told him I was private, made decisions alone, and had a pattern of choosing independence. Those things were true. That wasn't my question. You're trying to turn normal parental concern into some kind of conspiracy. I haven't used that word. Connor is angry with your sister. Evan wants to absolve himself. And now, suddenly, everybody is telling you what you want to hear. What do I want to hear, Mom? That none of your old relationships were your responsibility. I felt the anger then. Real anger. But I also felt something else. Recognition. That sentence was bait. If I defended every mistake I had ever made, the conversation would become about my personality instead of what she knew. So I did not take it. Did Kayla tell you she contacted Evan before or after he left me? My mother stopped talking. That's the question. You need to understand the state your sister was in back then. When did she tell you? She was young. When? She thought she was helping. When did she tell you? Linda's voice sharpened. Samantha, your sister was 25 and terrified after Evan left. I stopped breathing for a beat. My mother kept talking, but I barely heard the next few words. Terrified after Evan left. Not surprised. Not confused. Terrified. I pushed away from the counter. Terrified of what? The line went silent. I waited. My mother had always hated silence. She filled it with explanations, practicalities, reassurance, anything that prevented another person from deciding what it meant. This time she had nothing. Mom, I think we should discuss this in person. You just told me Kayla was terrified after Evan left me. Terrified of what? You are taking one word and building a story around it. No, I'm asking why you used it. She felt guilty. There it was. My hand tightened around the phone. Guilty about what? Linda inhaled slowly. I am not doing this like an interrogation. Then we can all do it once. What does that mean? I want you, Dad, Kayla, and me in the same room this weekend. My mother gave a disbelieving laugh. You are making this into a trial. No, I'm giving everyone one chance to answer the same questions. Connor needs to be there if this is about what he did at your wedding. This isn't about Connor. Daniel should be there. Daniel already told me what he knows. This is about our family. I heard her frustration rise. She liked groups when groups gave her more places to redirect pressure. She wanted Daniel present because then my marriage could become part of the discussion. She wanted Connor present because then his public outburst could become the problem. I was not giving her either. Saturday afternoon I said, Your house, Samantha. Tell Kyla. She may not want to come. Then I'll know that too. I ended the call before she could build another argument around the invitation. For several minutes, I stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing. My mother's slip had not proved exactly when Kayla confessed, or exactly what she admitted. I knew better than to turn one word into documentary evidence. But it gave me the next question. Kayla had been terrified after my engagement ended. My mother knew she was terrified. And when I had been the one sitting among canceled invitations and unopened wedding gifts, Linda had told me maybe the breakup proved I was not ready for marriage. For 11 years, I had thought my family looked back at that engagement and saw evidence about me. Now I understood they might have been looking at evidence about Kayla and hiding it from me. By Saturday morning, I had stopped thinking of the conversation with my family as a confrontation. Confrontations were emotional. They invited people to argue about tone, intention, old grievances, and who had hurt whom more. What I needed was a timeline, so I sat at our dining table with a yellow legal pad and reduced 11 years of anger to 5 questions. When did Kayla contact Evan? When did my mother learn about it? When did my father learn? What exactly did Kayla tell them after the engagement ended? And why did they never tell me? Daniel stood at the kitchen counter making coffee while I read the questions again. He had offered to come with me once, and when I said no, he did not offer a second time. That was one of the differences between support and takeover that I had only recently learned how to name. I can stay close if you want, he said. You don't need to sit in the driveway like security, I told him. I know. He set a mug beside my hand. I meant I can be here when you get back. I looked up at him and nodded. That I want. I had spent years treating self-sufficiency as the cleanest answer to disappointment. If someone hurt me, I withdrew until I could handle the consequences alone. It looked strong from the outside, and sometimes it was strong. But strength did not require pretending that I would feel nothing when my own parents admitted they had protected the person who interfered in my engagement. So before I left, I told Daniel something I would not have said 11 years earlier. I don't know what shape I'm going to be in when I come home. He touched my shoulder and said, whatever shape it is, come home in it. Then he let me go. My parents still lived in the suburban house where Kayla and I had spent most of high school. The neighborhood had newer roofs and larger trees now, but the driveway looked almost exactly the same. Craig's old basketball hoop was still bolted above the garage even though no one had used it in years. Linda had replaced the front door twice, changed the kitchen once, and repainted every room, yet the place still had a way of returning me to whatever age I had been the last time I felt powerless there. My mother opened the door before I rang the bell. You're early. I said 2. It isn't quite 2. I checked my phone. It's 1:56. She made the small, irritated sound she used when accuracy was technically on my side but socially inconvenient. Come in. I made coffee. I don't need coffee. There's tea too. I don't need tea. Her mouth tightened. Samantha. We are still allowed to behave like a family. That is what I'm here to discuss. She turned without answering and led me toward the living room. The seating arrangement was so familiar that I almost smiled. Craig was in his recliner near the window. Kayla sat on one end of the sofa. Linda took the other. That left the armchair across from all 3 of them for me. Nobody had planned it as a tactic. That was exactly why I noticed it. Families create patterns long before anyone realizes patterns can become weapons. Kayla looked tired. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes, and she was twisting her wedding ring with her thumb. Connor was not there. I did not ask where he was because this meeting was not about whether their marriage had survived the week. My mother noticed me noticing the empty space beside Kayla anyway. Connor decided he needed some time, she said. This has been very hard on your sister. I put my bag beside the chair. I'm not discussing Connor. You should understand the pressure she's under. I understand that she met my husband behind my back 2 days before my wedding. Samantha, Craig said. I held up one hand. I have 5 questions. If we answer them, this can be a short conversation. Linda gave a tired laugh. We're not employees in one of your meetings. No, employees are usually better about timelines. See? Kayla said. This is what you do. You turn everything into some cold process so you don't have to admit anyone had feelings. I looked at her. When did you first contact Evan? That stopped the room. Kayla's thumb froze against her ring. My mother leaned forward. We already discussed that you called him. I didn't ask Mom. Kayla looked toward our father. Craig looked down at his hands. Kyla. She exhaled. A few months before your wedding. The wedding that was supposed to happen in 2015. Yes. Before Evan ended the engagement. Yes. Why? I was worried. About what? You? That isn't specific. Her eyes flashed. About the way you were treating him. I reached into my bag, took out a printed copy of her email, and set it on the coffee table. I had debated bringing paper. In the end, I decided I did not want 4 people passing my phone around while arguing over screenshots. You sent him a photograph of me at a work dinner. I sent him something I thought he should see. You knew it was a group dinner. I knew you said it was a group dinner. It was a group dinner. I wasn't there. I stared at her. Neither was Evan. She looked away. That answer told me more about how she justified things than any confession could have. Kayla did not need to prove I had done something wrong. She only needed to make uncertainty sound responsible. You also told him about my travel assignment, I continued. And a college relationship. Things that happened. Yes, things that happened. Then you arranged them into a warning. I was trying to protect him. There it was, exactly as I expected. I leaned back. I'm not asking why yet. I'm asking what happened. You already decided why. No, I decided what the email says. Your motive can wait. Linda shifted beside her. This is cruel. I looked at my mother. What part? Making your sister sit here while you dissect something she did when she was 25. Did you know she did it? Linda stopped. That was question 2. When did you know? She folded her hands in her lap. Not before Evan left. I waited. I want that clear, she added. I did not know Kayla had contacted Evan when he emailed me. Fine. When did you know? Afterward. How long afterward? I don't remember an exact date. Days, weeks, months? Linda looked at Kayla. Kayla's face had gone pale. My mother sighed. A few days. I did not move. Craig spoke for the first time. Sam, your mother is telling you she didn't know when Evan contacted her. I heard her. She answered him based on what she knew about you. I read the emails. Then you know she didn't tell him to leave. I never said she did. My father rubbed a hand over his face. Then what are we doing? I looked at him. Finding out what happened after he left. The room fell quiet again. Linda's shoulders dropped slightly. For a moment, she looked much older than 64. Kayla came to me. When? 2 or 3 days after. After Evan ended our engagement? Yes. What did she tell you? My mother's eyes filled before Kayla's did. She was crying. That wasn't the question. She was terrified that you would hate her. What did she tell you? Linda's voice tightened. That she had talked to Evan. About what? Samantha, you've seen the email. I want to know what she told you. Kayla broke in. I told her I warned him. I turned toward her. Warned him about what? About the fact that you weren't being honest with him about everything. Name one thing I lied to him about. I didn't say you lied. You just said I wasn't being honest. You kept things from him. Suchas? The travel assignment. He knew about it before you contacted him, after you accepted it. That was a problem between Evan and me. You were not in that relationship. I was your sister. Exactly. Something shifted in Kayla's expression, but I did not stop long enough to interpret it. I looked back at Linda. Did she tell you about the photograph? Yes. Did she tell you she described me as someone likely to leave? My mother's mouth moved before sound came out. Not in those exact words. I pulled the email closer and pointed to the sentence. Samantha always needs a way out. She may not even realize she does it. Did you know she wrote this? Linda, read it. I knew she had said something like that. And you never told me? No. Did Dad know? Craig sat straighter. Eventually. How eventually? Your mother told me. When? He glanced at Linda. Within the same week, I think. You think? It was 11 years ago, Samantha. Was I still canceling vendors? He looked at me. Was I still returning gifts? No answer. Was I still calling people to tell them there wasn't going to be a wedding? Yes, he said quietly. That was all I needed. My parents had watched me dismantle a wedding while knowing my sister had helped destabilize the man I was supposed to marry. I did not feel the explosion I expected. Instead, everything became strangely precise. I could remember my mother sitting in my apartment with a casserole container on her lap. I could remember my father telling me it was better to learn the truth before marriage than after. At the time, I had thought they were helping me survive information they had learned alongside me. They had known more. Why didn't you tell me? Linda answered first. What good would it have done? I almost laughed. She leaned toward me. You were devastated. Evan had already left. Telling you Kayla had interfered would not have brought him back. It would have told me what happened. You knew what happened. You and Evan had problems. That's not the same thing. It mattered. Yes, it mattered. I made decisions without involving him. I got defensive when he questioned me. I was not perfect. Craig spread his hands slightly, as though relieved I had finally said something useful. Exactly. Everyone made mistakes. I turned toward him. Name mine. He blinked. You just said everyone made mistakes. Name mine. Sam, I'm not going to sit here and assign blame percentages. I didn't ask for percentages. Name my mistakes. He shifted in the chair. You made decisions that affected Evan without talking to him. Yes. You shut down when he questioned you. Yes. You could be stubborn. Yes. Craig gave a small nod, as if we were making progress. Now name yours. His face changed. My what? Your mistake. He looked at Linda. I waited. Samantha, that isn't productive. It was productive when we were listing mine. Linda cut in. Your father was trying to keep the family from exploding. That's his motive. What was his action? Craig's voice hardened. I knew Kayla had spoken to Evan and I didn't tell you. Thank you. You don't need to talk to me like I'm a witness. Then stop answering like one. His jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. I turned to Linda. Yours. She stared at me. You knew within days that Kayla had interfered. You had also replied to Evan in a way that validated his fears before you knew what Kayla had done. Then, after you found out, you never told me. I was protecting both of you. That's the motive. What was the action? My mother's eyes flashed. I chose not to hurt you more. No, you chose not to tell me. Yes, she snapped. Fine, I chose not to tell you. The words sat between us. For 11 years, Linda had wrapped that choice in care. Once the wrapping came off, it looked much smaller. Kayla stood abruptly and walked to the fireplace. Can we stop acting like one email ended your engagement? I looked at her back. I haven't said that. You keep saying I sabotaged you. I said you interfered. Same thing. No, sabotage does not require complete control over the outcome. She turned. Evan already had doubts. I know. You already had problems. I know. You were already pulling away. That part is your interpretation. It was obvious. I felt the old instinct rise in me. Defend. Explain. List every loving thing I had done for Evan. Prove that I had been committed enough, warm enough, accommodating enough. Then I understood that if I did that, Kayla would win the argument she wanted instead of answering the question I had asked. So I let the accusation sit. My flaws were real, I said. Your interference was also real. One does not erase the other. Linda shook her head. Life isn't that simple. I know. That's why I'm not saying Evan left only because of Kayla. Craig looked surprised. I continued. Evan made his own choice. I made mistakes in that relationship. Kayla manipulated information. Mom reinforced his suspicion. Dad knew afterward and stayed silent. Those statements can all be true at the same time. My father looked down. Kayla's eyes filled with tears. Do you have any idea what it was like growing up next to you? The question came from nowhere, and yet somehow explained why we were finally getting close to something real. I looked at her. Tell me. She laughed bitterly. Of course, now you want to listen. I've been asking you to explain what you did for an hour. No, you want an admission you can organize into one of your little timelines. Then, don't give me one. That threw her. Tell me what you actually want to say. Kayla folded her arms tightly across her chest. You always got to be the one who didn't need anything. I frowned. What? You went away to college, you got the good jobs, you moved out and never looked back. Every time Mom and Dad worried about money, or somebody needed help or plans changed, you could just say no, because Samantha had a career and Samantha had boundaries. That isn't what happened. It is from where I was standing. Linda reached for her. Honey, Kayla stepped away from our mother. She got praised for being smart even when she was cold. I got praised when I kept people happy. I watched her carefully. There was anger in what she said, but underneath it was something older. Then why interfere with Evan? Because I knew you. No, try again. Her lips pressed together. You just said this is about growing up next to me. So tell me what Evan had to do with that. Kayla's eyes locked on mine. You already had everything else. The room went completely still. I waited. She seemed to hear her own sentence only after it left her mouth. Everything else then what? I asked. That's not what I meant. What did you mean? I meant you had your career and your independence, and everybody thought you were so capable. And? Linda stood. Samantha, that's enough. I looked at her. She was answering. You're pushing her. She's 35. She is still your sister. I almost admired how quickly the old machinery restarted. Kayla crossed a boundary. Kayla cried. Linda protected Kayla. Samantha was expected to become reasonable enough for all 4 people. I stood too. My mother stiffened. Don't leave every time something gets uncomfortable. It was such a familiar accusation that years earlier it would have worked. I picked up my bag. I'm not uncomfortable. I'm finished with the questions I came here to ask. We're not finished, Craig said. I am for today. Kayla wiped her cheeks angrily. There. That's exactly what I mean. You get to walk away and act like you're above all of us. I turned toward her. I'm not above you. I'm also not required to sit here until everyone feels better. You don't care what this is doing to my marriage. Connor is your husband. What happens between the 2 of you belongs to the choices the 2 of you made. You started digging all of this up. You met Daniel on Friday. Her mouth snapped shut. I headed toward the hallway. Behind me, Linda said, You still haven't told me whether we're getting a key to your house. I stopped. For 1 second, I honestly thought I had misheard her. What? The spare key. You said we'd discuss it after the wedding. After everything happening now, it would be good if we weren't shut out completely. I stared at my mother. The timing was so perfect it almost felt written. Except real families rarely understand the symbols they hand you. You are not getting a key. Linda looked genuinely offended. Why? Because it is my home. I am your mother. That isn't a locksmith credential. Craig muttered my name in warning. Linda's face hardened. This is exactly the kind of thing Kayla means. Everything with you is a boundary. Not everything. What isn't? Respect. She flinched as if I had raised my voice. I had not. I turned back toward the door. Then Kayla spoke. You know Marcus didn't think you were so easy to build a life with either. I stopped again. Marcus was not a subject we had been discussing. I turned slowly. What does Marcus have to do with Evan? Nothing. I'm saying there was a pattern before Daniel. What pattern? You always made decisions without people. That isn't an answer. She gave a frustrated laugh. Marcus knew about Seattle before you admitted it to him. He wasn't imagining things either. Something inside me clicked. Seattle. Marcus. The final interview I had taken 6 years earlier and never accepted. I had told Kayla I was interviewing. I remembered that. I had told very few people because I had not even known whether I wanted the job. Marcus and I had fought after he learned about it. At the time, I thought the argument started because somebody at work had mentioned the opportunity around him. I looked directly at Kayla. How do you know what Marcus knew? She blinked. I just remember. From where? You probably told me. I told you I was interviewing. Exactly. I never told you when Marcus found out. Kayla looked toward Linda. It was fast. Barely a movement. But my mother immediately looked away. I felt my pulse change. Did you talk to Marcus? No. The answer came too quickly. Did you message him? This is ridiculous. That's not no. I don't remember every conversation I had 6 years ago. A few minutes earlier, she had remembered exactly what Marcus knew before I admitted Seattle to him. Now she could not remember whether she had spoken to him. I reached for the door. Samantha, Craig said. Don't start another investigation. I looked back at him. Then maybe stop giving me things that need explaining. Linda crossed her arms. You're going to destroy this family if you keep digging through old relationships, looking for reasons to blame your sister. I opened the door. The strange thing is, Mom, I didn't bring up Marcus. No one answered. Outside, the afternoon air felt warmer than it had when I arrived. I walked to my car without looking back at the house. But this time, leaving did not feel like retreat. I had gone there with 5 questions. I had answers to 4 of them. And the 5th had changed shape while I was sitting in the room. My parents had known what Kayla did within days of Evan leaving me. They chose silence because Kayla was falling apart and because they believed I would survive. Then they spent 11 years using that failed engagement as evidence about my character. That should have been enough for one day. It was not. I sat behind the wheel and opened my phone. I did not call Marcus. Not yet. I was too angry. and anger had a way of turning questions into accusations before you noticed the difference. Instead, I opened a new note and typed one sentence. Marcus knew about Seattle before I told him I had reached a final interview. Then beneath it, I typed the question that had changed Kayla's face before she could stop it. How did you know what Marcus knew about Seattle? I did not contact Marcus that Saturday night. I wanted to. I sat in my car outside my parents' house with his name already pulled up on my phone and enough anger in my chest to convince myself that waiting was cowardice. But I had just spent 2 hours demanding that my family separate facts from intentions, and I knew exactly what would happen if I called an ex-boyfriend while I was still furious. I would ask questions shaped like accusations, then tell myself whatever answer I got was proof. So I closed his contact, drove home, and let one night pass before I decided what I actually needed from him. Daniel was making breakfast Sunday morning when I told him about Kayla's comment. He was standing at the stove in gray sweatpants, trying to make eggs without admitting that half of them had already stuck to the pan, and for a few minutes I was grateful to be discussing something serious in a room that smelled like coffee instead of my mother's perfume. I told him exactly what Kayla had said about Marcus knowing about Seattle before I admitted it to him, then explained why that bothered me. 6 years earlier, I had been in the final round for a job in Seattle. I had not accepted anything. I had not even received an offer. Somehow, Marcus had gone into one of our worst arguments, believing I was much closer to leaving Ohio than I actually was. Daniel slid eggs onto 2 plates and sat across from me. Do you remember telling Kayla about the interview? Yes, I remember that clearly. Do you remember telling her what you planned to do? There wasn't a plan yet. That isn't what I asked. I looked at him. No. I didn't tell her I was taking it. Because I wasn't taking it. He nodded and started eating. I recognized the technique. You think I'm getting ahead of the facts. I think yesterday your sister accidentally said something worth checking. But checking isn't the same as building a case. I set my fork down. I'm not collecting witnesses. I know. Do you? Yes. He met my eyes. And I also know how easy it would be for this to become the story where Kayla explains every relationship that ever went wrong in your life. I don't think you want that. I did not like hearing it because part of me absolutely wanted that. There was comfort in imagining one clean villain behind years of confusion. If Kayla had poisoned Evan against me, and then done the same thing with Marcus, I could reopen my past and redistribute every ounce of blame I had carried. The temptation was obvious. It was also intellectually lazy. I want to know what she did, I said. Then ask exactly that. So I did. I sent Marcus one message shortly before noon. Hi, Marcus. Unexpected question and no emergency. Do you remember whether my sister Kayla ever contacted you directly about the Seattle job I interviewed for? I'm not looking to reopen our relationship. I just need to verify something she said yesterday. Then I put my phone away and helped Daniel finish the thank you notes from our wedding. Marcus answered that afternoon. He said yes. He remembered Kayla contacting him. But he was spending Memorial Day weekend with family and did not want to rush through a 6-year-old conversation from memory. He offered to call Tuesday evening when he was home. I thanked him and left it there. My mother would have interpreted waiting as weakness. Kayla probably would have called it avoidance. I saw it differently now. Urgency was useful when a building was on fire. It was less useful when the danger was convincing yourself that memory was evidence. Monday was Memorial Day. Daniel and I stayed home, grilled burgers on the small patio behind our townhouse, and ignored my family except for one text from Craig, saying he hoped everyone could cool off over the holiday. I did not answer. Connor did not contact me either, which I appreciated. Whatever was happening inside his marriage, I did not want to become the person Kayla had been in mine, inserting myself because I believed I understood somebody else's relationship better than the people living in it. Marcus called Tuesday at a little after 7. I took the call in the office while Daniel stayed downstairs. Marcus sounded almost exactly as I remembered him. Perhaps because 6 years was not long enough to make a voice feel foreign. We had ended without hatred. There had been anger, disappointment, and a few months when mutual friends learned not to invite us to the same dinner, but eventually both of us had moved on. He knew I had gotten married because some old friends still followed me online. I knew he had built a life of his own because the same was true in reverse. Neither of us had any interest in pretending the call was nostalgic. I remember the message, he said after we finished the necessary small talk. I don't remember every word. That's fine. Start with what you're sure of. You had told me you were interviewing in Seattle. Yes. I knew there was an opportunity. I did not know how far along you were. That matches what I remember. Then Kayla messaged me. On Facebook? Messenger. Yes. What did she say? He hesitated. Something like, I thought Sam already told you she was probably taking Seattle. I leaned forward. Probably taking it? That is what I remember. Or very close. Did she say I had an offer? I don't think so. Did she say I had accepted? No, but that's the impression I got. I wrote the distinction down. What did you ask her? I asked why you hadn't told me. And? She said she assumed you had, because you'd been talking about it. That phrase irritated me immediately. I had been talking about the interview with her. Right. I hadn't told her I was moving. I know that now. Marcus, I need you to be careful with that sentence. Did you know it then? No. I appreciated him for correcting himself before I had to. He continued. At the time, I thought you were almost decided and I was the last person to know. I remembered the argument so clearly that for a moment I could see his old apartment instead of my office. Marcus had been standing beside the kitchen island, asking why I had not told him I was planning to move across the country. I had thought he was being absurd because, as far as I was concerned, there was no move. There was an interview, a possibility, a conversation I intended to have when there was something concrete enough to discuss. I told you there was nothing to tell yet, I said. Yes. You hated that. Yes. Why? He took his time answering. Because that was the problem. I leaned back. There was something to tell, Marcus said. Not that you were moving. That you were thinking about something that could have changed both our lives. I didn't know if I wanted it. Exactly. I closed my eyes for a second. He had said something similar 6 years earlier, but I had been too defensive to hear the distinction. I had believed that involving him before I had a decision would create unnecessary anxiety. In my mind, I was protecting both of us from discussing an outcome that might never exist. To Marcus, the uncertainty itself was part of the relationship. You wanted to be included while I was deciding. Yes. I wanted to decide what I thought before I brought you into it. Yes. That was a real problem between us. It was. I wrote that down too. There was no satisfaction in the admission, but there was relief. I did not want a version of my past where I became innocent by becoming passive. Did Kayla create that problem? I asked. No. Did her message make it worse? Yes. How? Because instead of hearing from you that Seattle was a possibility, I heard from your sister that you were probably taking it. By the time we talked, I wasn't asking whether you were considering something. I was asking why you had practically decided without me. And I thought you were accusing me of hiding a decision I hadn't made. Exactly. I rubbed my forehead. 2 people had entered the same argument, carrying different facts. Kayla had not invented Seattle. She had done something more efficient. She removed uncertainty. An interview became probability. Possibility became intention. Then she delivered the stronger version to the person most likely to be hurt by it. Why did she contact you? I asked. Marcus gave a humorless laugh. I thought you might know that. I am starting to. She framed it as concern. Said she didn't want me finding out from someone else if you were serious about leaving. Was there someone else to find out from? Not that I knew. Did she ever tell you I had accepted? No. Did she tell you I was definitely moving? No. So if I confronted her, she could honestly say she never told you either one. Yes. I stared at the page in front of me. That was the method. With Evan, she had not said I was cheating. She had shown him a photograph, attached unrelated truths, and let him wonder whether I was. With Marcus, she had not said I had accepted Seattle. She had taken a real interview, upgraded its likelihood, and let him imagine the rest. Kayla did not build lies from nothing. She altered the weight of true things. Do you still have the message? I asked. I don't know. My Messenger account is old, but I never deleted it. If you can find it, would you send me the full conversation? I'll look. Don't spend your whole night on it. I won't. And if you can't find it, that's fine. I'm not asking you to recreate it. I understand. There was a pause before Marcus spoke again. Can I ask you something? Sure. Is this about your wedding? I smiled despite myself. That traveled fast. A couple people we both know saw something vague online. Nothing specific. My sister met Daniel 2 days before the wedding to warn him about me. Marcus went quiet. That sounds familiar, he said. Yes. I'm sorry. Thank you. He hesitated. For what it's worth, I never thought you were incapable of being in a relationship. That is a very diplomatic sentence. I've had 6 years to improve my delivery. I laughed. Then he became serious again. I did think you kept people out of the process sometimes. I know. You probably still do. Less successfully. Good. I did not need more closure than that. Marcus had not been waiting for me. I had not secretly been waiting for him. We were 2 people who had once loved each other and eventually learned enough to describe why that was not sufficient. Before we ended the call, I said, I'm sorry I treated your wanting to be involved like you were trying to control me. He was silent for a second. Thank you. You weren't wrong to want a conversation. No. And I wasn't wrong to consider Seattle. Nah. We were both terrible at the middle part. That sounds about right. After we hung up, I stayed at the desk and looked at my notes. The difference between Evan and Marcus mattered. With Evan, Kayla had entered a relationship already under strain and fed him a narrative about my character. My parents then reinforced his fear. I still believed our engagement might have survived if that had not happened because the distrust had been amplified by people he thought knew me. With Marcus, the crack had been deeper and more specific. I had genuinely kept him outside an important decision-making process because I believed uncertainty belonged to me until I had solved it. Kayla had exploited that crack, but she had not created it. I was still thinking about that when Daniel came upstairs. How did it go? Kayla contacted him. His expression hardened, and Marcus also had a legitimate complaint about me. That changed his face. I told him the whole conversation. Daniel listened from the chair across from my desk, occasionally asking a question but never trying to rank who had been more wrong. When I finished, I leaned back and said the sentence that had been forming in my mind since the call ended. Kayla did this to both relationships. Daniel was quiet. I noticed. What? He rubbed his thumb along the edge of the chair. Do you mean she interfered in both? I frowned. Yes. Or do you mean both ended because of her? I felt irritation rise so quickly that I almost snapped at him. What exactly are you trying to say? That I wasn't there. That has not stopped anyone else in my family. I am not your family in this conversation. The sentence stopped me. Daniel continued carefully. You told me Evan's distrust grew because Kayla gave him reasons to question you, and your parents confirmed them. With Marcus, you're telling me the 2 of you had a real conflict about how you made decisions. Kayla made it worse. I'm just asking whether you want those to become the same story. For a few seconds, I disliked him very much. Then I realized why. He was preventing me from doing exactly what Kayla did, taking facts that resembled each other and flattening their differences until they produced the conclusion I wanted. I stood and walked to the window. You're right. You don't have to say it that fast. I want to before I invent a reason you're wrong. He laughed softly. I looked back at him. Kayla interfered in both. She manipulated both men. But I can't say she ended both relationships. No. Evan might have stayed if he'd known what she was doing. Maybe. And Marcus and I might still have broken up even if Kayla had never sent anything. Probably? I considered it. Probably. The word hurt less than I expected. I hate that. I know. I wanted a cleaner answer. Clean answers are usually how your sister works. That earned him a look. He lifted both hands. Too soon? A little. But he was right. Later that night, Marcus forwarded the messenger conversation. He had needed to search his archive using Seattle first, then Kayla's name. Several unrelated old messages came up before he found the thread. He sent the entire exchange, not cropped screenshots. and I downloaded a copy with the timestamps intact. The message was almost exactly as he remembered. Kayla had written, "I thought Sam already told you she was probably taking the Seattle job. Sorry if I stepped into something. She talks about work with me, so I assumed you knew." Marcus replied, "Taking it?" I thought she was interviewing. Kayla's answer was the most revealing. "Maybe I'm wrong about how far along it is. You know Sam, she doesn't talk until she's made up her mind." There was the whole mechanism in 3 sentences. First, stronger claim, then retreat, then character interpretation. If Marcus challenged her, she had already protected herself with "maybe I'm wrong," but the fear had been planted. I saved the full thread beside Evan's email and Daniel's messages. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired. Kayla had been 25 when she contacted Evan. She had been around 30 when she contacted Marcus. She had been 35 when she approached Daniel. That was no longer a mistake she made while young and insecure. It was a strategy she returned to whenever my relationship threatened something inside her. The question was no longer whether she had a method. The question was what she believed she was protecting. Connor called the next afternoon. I almost did not answer, because I had promised myself I would not become part of the daily management of his marriage. Then I remembered he had respected every boundary I had given him so far, so I picked up. "I am not calling to give you dirt on Kayla," he said immediately. "That is a promising opening. I mean it. I believe you." He sounded exhausted. "We're not doing well." I did not ask whether they were separating. "I'm sorry. I've been thinking about something you asked at the wedding. Why she does this." I sat down. "I didn't ask you that." "No, but you will. Probably." Connor was quiet for a moment. "For years, whenever your name came up, Kayla talked about you like you were the opposite of her." "In what way?" "You were independent. She was committed. You were career first. She was family first. You didn't need anybody. She knew how to compromise." I thought about my mother's toast. Did Kayla say those things? Some. Your mother said plenty too. That sounds like Linda. I used to think it was just normal sister comparison. Annoying, but normal. And now? Now I remember how much Kayla needed those comparisons to end the same way. I waited. If you got promoted, she would say she could never put work ahead of family like that. If you traveled alone, she'd say she preferred doing things with her husband. If you weren't dating anyone, she would say she'd rather have less independence and someone waiting at home. I felt a slow pressure behind my ribs. Did she criticize me directly? Sometimes. Mostly, she made herself the alternative. That sounded right. Connor continued. Linda helped. She'd call us her steady couple, her proof that marriage worked if people stopped being stubborn. I hated it sometimes. Why didn't you say anything? I did a few times, but mostly I let it go because arguing about your mother wasn't worth it. There was Craig's philosophy in a younger man. Keep the peace. Let it go. Don't make one comment into a problem. I wondered how many family systems survived only because everyone agreed not to name what they were maintaining. I'm not asking you to explain Kayla for me, I said. I know. Or to make decisions about your marriage because of what she did to me. I know that too. He was quiet. Then he said, but there is one thing I think you should understand. What? She never talked about your relationships like they were your relationships, Sam. I frowned. What does that mean? She talked about them like they were scoreboards. The word landed differently from everything else I had learned. A photograph could explain how. A messenger thread could explain what. A timeline could explain when. But scoreboards explained something far more dangerous. Why? Connor's words stayed with me after we hung up. Scoreboards. It was a dramatic word for something that had always looked ordinary in my family. Linda did not sit us down as children and announce that her daughters would spend the next 30 years competing. Craig never kept a chart on the refrigerator. Nobody gave points for promotions or marriages or who hosted Thanksgiving better. The comparisons were quieter than that, woven into compliments until none of us thought to question them. I was the smart one, the responsible one, the girl who could figure things out. Kayla was the sweet one, the people person, the daughter who would someday have a beautiful family because she understood how relationships worked. By the time we were adults, those descriptions had stopped being observations. They had become assignments. That Wednesday, I was sorting the last of our wedding gifts when I found a cardboard box of photographs I had brought from my old apartment during the move. Most were ordinary family pictures my mother had duplicated over the years. Kayla and me sitting on the front steps in matching coats. Kayla at a school concert while I stood beside Linda holding flowers. Me in a college sweatshirt with Craig's arm around my shoulders. One photograph showed us at a family barbecue when I was about 16 and Kayla was 13. I had a book open on my lap. She was laughing at something outside the frame. I could almost hear my mother describing the picture. Samantha could read through a tornado. Kayla could make friends with the tornado. Those comments had seemed harmless. Sometimes they were affectionate. But once I started looking for the pattern, I remembered what usually came next. If I had trouble at school, Linda expected me to solve it because I was responsible. If Kayla had trouble with a friend, Mom spent an hour helping her understand everyone's feelings because Kayla cared so deeply about people. When I left for college, Linda told relatives she barely worried about me because I had always been self-sufficient. When Kayla moved into her first apartment, both of my parents helped her unpack for an entire weekend. At the time, I had been proud. I did not need help. That was the story. What nobody told me was that once a family decides you do not need much, asking for anything starts to look like a personality change. I put the photograph down when my phone rang. Connor's name appeared on the screen. "Is this a bad time?" he asked. "No, I'm home. I've been thinking about what I said yesterday." "About scoreboards?" "Yes." I sat at the dining table. "Go ahead. I don't want you using what I tell you as ammunition in my marriage." "I won't. And I'm not telling you because I want you to forgive Kayla." "I know." He was silent for a moment. "I think I spent years helping her maintain something I didn't realize she needed so badly." "What?" "The idea that we were the successful couple." That did not surprise me, but I let him explain. Connor said Linda had started calling them the steady ones within the first few years of their marriage. At family gatherings, if someone complained about a spouse, my mother pointed toward Kayla and Connor as evidence that marriage worked when two people knew how to compromise. If I was single, Kayla became proof that a woman could have a career and still prioritize a relationship. If I was dating someone, Linda compared the way Kayla handled disagreements with the way I supposedly did. "At first I thought your mother was just proud of us," Connor said. "Then it started making Kayla nervous whenever anything between us wasn't perfect." "What kind of nervous?" "If we argued before a family dinner, she'd want it resolved before we walked through your parents' door. Not just tabled. Resolved." "That sounds exhausting." It was. "Did you ever tell her?" "Yes." "What happened?" "She'd say she didn't want Linda asking questions." I thought about my mother. "Mom always asks questions." "I know. Were you unhappy for 10 years?" "No." His answer came quickly. "I don't want this rewritten either. We had good years. We had problems. Normal marriage problems. I loved her. I still care about her." I respected him for saying it. "But?" I asked. "But I let the image become part of the marriage too. There were times I stayed quiet because I didn't want to be the guy who proved your mother wrong about us." "That was your choice." "Yes." He did not defend it. I should have pushed back harder. I should have told Kayla I wasn't going to perform for her family. Instead, sometimes I went along because it was easier. There it was again, not a monster. A system made from small decisions that each person could explain. "What happened when I got engaged to Daniel?" I asked. Connor gave a tired laugh. "Kayla acted happy." "Acted?" "She was happy for you, I think. But she also started talking about your relationship more." "In what way?" "She kept predicting problems." I felt my hand tighten around the phone. "Such as?" "That Daniel would eventually get tired of being second to your work. That you would decide you wanted to live somewhere else without asking him. That the wedding planning would make you realize marriage was too restrictive." "Did she ever say she wanted us to fail?" "No. Of course she had not. She'd say things like, 'I hope Sam understands marriage is different from dating.' Or, 'Daniel seems patient, but everyone has limits.'" I closed my eyes. Concern again. Always concern. Why didn't you tell me? Connor took longer to answer that. Because it sounded like sister stuff. That phrase covers a lot. I know that now. And because telling me would have created conflict. Yes. I almost smiled despite myself. You would have gotten along well with my father. I did. Neither of us laughed. Before the call ended, Connor said something that stayed with me. I don't think Kayla sat around wanting you miserable. I think she needed one part of her life to mean she had done something better than you. That was uglier than simple hatred because I understood it. Not approved. Understood. When people grow up being compared, winning can start to feel less like pleasure and more like proof of existence. I spent the rest of Wednesday thinking about whether I wanted to talk to Kayla again. I already knew what she had done. I had Evan's email, Marcus's messages, Daniel's Friday thread, and her admissions at my parents' house. Motive would not erase evidence. It would not change my boundaries. But motive mattered for one reason. If I did not understand what Kayla believed she was defending, I would never know whether the pattern was finished. So Thursday morning I texted her. Coffee. Just you and me. No mom, no dad. If you want to explain why you did this is the time. She responded almost immediately. Are you going to record me? I stared at the question. No. Can I trust that? I almost typed something angry. Instead, I wrote, yes. We met that afternoon at a coffee shop about 15 minutes from my townhouse, far enough from my parents' neighborhood that nobody was likely to wander in. I arrived first and chose a small table near the windows. Kayla came in wearing jeans, a light sweater, and no makeup. Her wedding ring was still on her hand. She sat across from me without ordering anything. You look like you're conducting an interview, she said. Then order coffee. I don't want coffee. Fine. She folded her arms. What do you want? The answer you kept trying to give me on Saturday. I already answered. You said you were protecting people. I was. From what? She stared at me. Evan, I said. What were you protecting him from? Getting married without understanding who you were. Marcus? He deserved to know you might leave. Daniel? Same thing. I nodded slowly. So the danger was me. You make it sound ridiculous. I am repeating your explanation. You're stripping out context. Then put it back. For several seconds, she looked through the window instead of at me. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its defensiveness. You've always been able to walk away. From what? Anything. That isn't true. You left Peter for Chicago. I was 21 and took an internship. You accepted the assignment before talking to Evan. Yes. You interviewed in Seattle without really including Marcus. Yes. And when people confronted you, you shut down. Sometimes. She looked almost startled. You're not going to argue? Not about things that are true. Her shoulders loosened slightly. I continued. Now, explain why those things gave you the right to contact the men I was dating without telling me. Her expression hardened again. Because you never see what you do to people. That's an opinion. It isn't. Then why didn't you come to me? I did. When? You never listened. Give me one example. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I waited. Finally she said, You always had an answer. That still doesn't explain contacting them. You don't understand. Then help me. Kayla pushed her chair back a few inches and crossed her arms tighter. You want me to say I was jealous. I want you to say whatever is true. You've already decided. No. Connor gave me his opinion. I'm asking for yours. Her eyes sharpened at his name. Connor has opinions now. He always had them. Maybe you preferred when he kept them quiet. That is between me and my husband. Yes. Which is why I'm not asking about your marriage. She looked away again. I let the silence stay. Kayla hated silence almost as much as Linda did, though for a different reason. My mother filled silence to control a room. Kayla filled it because she could not stand the possibility that somebody else was forming an opinion she had not influenced. You were always the one Mom and Dad bragged about, she said finally. I frowned. What? The grades, college, work, every promotion. Every time somebody asked how you were doing, Mom had something impressive to say. And when people asked about you, she talked about Connor. That isn't my fault. I didn't say it was. You're about to. Her eyes filled with sudden anger. This is why talking to you is impossible. You always know where everything is going. No, I know where this conversation usually goes. You got to be good at everything. That is not true. Enough things. She leaned toward me. You were the one who didn't need help. The one Dad trusted with money questions. The one Mom told people was fearless. You moved out and built a career and bought things without asking whether anyone approved. You could be difficult and people called you strong. I did not interrupt. I was good at people, she continued. That was my thing. I was the one who remembered birthdays. I was the one who stayed close. I was the one who wanted marriage and kids and family dinners and all the things you acted like were optional. I never called those things optional. You didn't have to. You acted like needing people was weakness. That landed. Not because it was completely true, because a piece of it was. At 25, I probably had looked at Kayla's need for approval and thought I was stronger because I needed less. I had been proud of not asking my parents for help, proud of not changing plans because somebody was unhappy, proud of how easily I could leave a room when everyone else wanted me to stay and smooth things over. Some of that pride had been healthy. Some had been armor. I probably did judge you for needing approval, I said. Kayla blinked. That was unfair. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then I continued. It still doesn't explain Evan. Her face closed again. You keep trying to make these equivalent. I'm not. Yes, you are. You're admitting one little flaw so you can stay morally above me. I am admitting my flaw because it's mine. And mine? Contacting my partners behind my back is yours. She shook her head. You don't understand what it was like. Then tell me. Her voice cracked. You already had everything else. The sentence came out louder than she intended. I did not respond immediately. Kayla pressed her lips together, but it was too late to take it back. What did I have? You know. No, say it. She looked furious now. Though I could not tell whether the anger was at me or herself. You had the career. You had money. You had confidence. You could tell Mom no and sleep at night afterward. Dad respected you. Dad loves you. I didn't say he didn't. You said he respected me. He treated your decisions like decisions. Mine were always feelings. That sounded painfully plausible. I thought of Craig asking me for advice on insurance paperwork years earlier while telling Kayla not to worry her pretty head about some repair problem at her house. I had rolled my eyes at him. I had never wondered how many times she heard that kind of thing. So marriage was yours, I said. Her eyes moved back to mine. At least I was good at that. And if I got married? It wasn't just getting married. What was it? You were going to have all of it. I felt no satisfaction hearing her admit it. Only sadness. Kayla, you were married. I was not taking that from you. You don't get it. Then explain the math. She laughed bitterly. Of course you call it math. You called it everything else. I'm asking what was left. She looked down at her hands. Mom always said I understood relationships better than you. She said I knew how to make a home. She said you were too independent to compromise. I know. 10 years, Sam. Every time she said it, I believed it more. So when I met Daniel, you changed. In what way? You stopped choosing men who needed you to be different. That sentence caught me off guard. Kayla continued before I could answer. Daniel never seemed threatened by your job. He didn't care that you needed space. When Mom made comments, he didn't laugh along. Then you got engaged and everybody was talking about how happy you looked. And suddenly nobody could say maybe Samantha just isn't marriage material anymore. I stared at her. There it was. Not attraction to Daniel. Not some secret plan to steal my fiancé. Something smaller and more poisonous. If my relationship succeeded, a story Kayla had used to define herself would stop being true. And that frightened you. She looked away. Yes. So you tried to make Daniel doubt me. I tried to make sure he knew what he was getting. No. She looked back. You were afraid he already knew what he was getting and wanted it anyway. Kayla's eyes filled. For the first time since my wedding, she did not have an answer ready. I leaned back. I wish you'd told me this years ago. What would you have done? I don't know. You would have told me I was insecure? Maybe. You would have been right. Probably. She laughed once through her tears. Then she wiped them away angrily. Do you have any idea how infuriating it is that you can sit there and admit things like that now? Yes. No, you don't. You're right. I don't know what it felt like to be you. She stared at me. But you don't know what it felt like to be me either. I watched you have everything. You watched me get praised for not needing anything. Kayla's expression changed. I continued. Do you know what that meant when I actually needed Mom? She looked down. When Evan left, she knew what you had done. She sat beside me and let me believe the whole failure said something about me. Because protecting you was easier than telling me the truth. She was protecting you too. No, she thought knowing would hurt you. It did hurt me. I just didn't know what was hurting me. Kayla had no answer to that. For a while we sat in silence, while people moved around us carrying drinks and laptops. Completely unaware that two sisters were dismantling 3 decades of family mythology beside a window. Finally, Kayla said, So what happens now? I don't know. Are you going to tell everybody? I haven't decided. Connor already thinks I'm some kind of monster. Connor's opinion belongs to Connor. You could tell him I wasn't trying to destroy anyone. I can tell him what you told me if you want. I can't tell him what conclusion to reach. She shook her head. You always walk away and let everyone else deal with the damage. I almost smiled. There it was. The old accusation. I am going to walk away from this conversation. Of course. Not because it got ugly. She looked at me. Because we finally reached the truth. I picked up my bag. Kayla's face crumpled for a second before she recovered. So that's it? For today. You get your answer and leave. Yes. That is so you. Maybe. I stood beside the table. But here's the difference. I'm not leaving you to guess why. She stared at me. You interfered with 3 relationships because you needed my failures to protect the one identity our parents gave you. I understand why now. I also understand that their comparisons helped create this. None of that makes your choices mine. Kayla's mouth tightened. I never knew we were competing, I said. She gave me a look filled with something between resentment and disbelief. Of course you didn't. Why? Because you were winning. For a moment the answer hurt. Then I understood what it meant. Kayla had spent years participating in a contest whose rules had been written by our parents. I had spent those same years resenting the comparisons and walking away from them whenever I could. Neither of us had been free of the system, but only one of us had secretly contacted the other's partners. I wasn't winning, I said. I just wasn't keeping score. Then I left. This time, walking away felt different from every departure my family had used against me. I was not leaving because I could not defend myself. I was leaving because the conversation had given me the answer I came for. And staying longer would only turn truth into another argument. By the time I reached my townhouse, I felt wrung out rather than angry. Daniel was still at work. I changed clothes, put the coffee shop receipt on the kitchen counter without knowing why, and spent an hour answering emails. Ordinary tasks helped. They reminded me that understanding my family did not require letting them consume the entire day. My phone rang shortly after 6. My Aunt Diane. She was my father's younger sister and one of the relatives who had attended the wedding. We spoke a few times a year, usually around birthdays or holidays. She did not normally call on a Thursday evening. Hey, Aunt Diane. Sweetheart, is this a bad time? No. She hesitated. I don't want to get involved in something that isn't my business. That sentence usually meant involvement had already started. What happened? Your mother called me. I closed my laptop. What did she say? Diane sighed. She said Connor is having some kind of midlife crisis and is blaming Kayla for problems in their marriage. She said you're still angry about what happened at the reception, and you've started dragging up old relationships to punish your sister. I went very still. Anything else? She said you've been calling old boyfriends looking for evidence against Kayla. Technically true. Meaning completely altered. My mother had learned from the same school as my sister. I called Evan and Marcus to ask whether Kayla contacted them. Diane was quiet. Did she? Yes. Oh, one small syllable. That was the sound of Linda's version, developing a crack. Did Mom tell you that? No. Did she tell you Kayla met Daniel before my wedding? She said Kayla was concerned and spoke to him. Did she tell you Connor asked Kayla to tell me before the wedding? And Mom asked everyone to wait until Monday? Another silence. No. Okay. Diane sounded uncomfortable. Sam, I'm not calling to interrogate you. I know. I just didn't want to repeat something if it wasn't accurate. I appreciate that. Do you want me to tell your mother I called? No, you can if you want. I'm not asking anyone to keep secrets. That sentence felt important when I said it. After we hung up, another message arrived. A cousin this time. I don't want to get in the middle, but your mom says you're trying to break up Kayla and Connor because you're embarrassed about the wedding. Please don't punish your sister for something Connor did publicly. I read it once. Then again, the old version of me would have ignored it. I would have told myself anyone who believed that did not know me well enough to deserve an explanation. I would have left the family group chat, stopped answering calls, and allowed Linda to keep talking until her version became the version. That was how I had handled conflict for years. Exit. Silence. Let them think what they wanted. It had protected my energy. It had also left empty rooms for other people to fill. I opened the family group chat. My mother's message had arrived 20 minutes earlier. I know everyone is hearing pieces of what happened at the wedding. Samantha is understandably emotional, but she has begun revisiting relationships from years ago and blaming Kayla for choices made by grown men. Connor is under stress and has turned a private marital issue into a public humiliation. Please give Kayla space and don't encourage this cycle of blame. We love both our daughters and hope Samantha will stop punishing her sister for trying, however imperfectly, to protect people she cared about. I read the message carefully. Understandably emotional. Revisiting relationships. Blaming Kayla. Cycle of blame. Trying to protect people. Nothing explicitly false enough to make the whole message collapse on contact. That was the technique. Select facts. Change emphasis. Supply interpretation. Reach the audience first. For a moment, I was back at 27, arguing with Evan about a work dinner while he carried an email I had never seen. Then I was back with Marcus, defending a Seattle decision I had never made because somebody else had turned an interview into a departure. Then I saw Daniel sitting across from Kayla 2 days before our wedding while she explained my character to him before I even knew the conversation existed. It was not just Kayla's method. It was the family's. Get to the other person first. Define Samantha before Samantha enters the room. I did not answer my mother's message. Not yet. Instead, I opened the folder where I had saved everything. Kayla's email to Evan. My mother's replies to him. Marcus's messenger thread. Kayla's messages to Daniel. Connor's Saturday thread showing that Linda and Craig knew about Friday before the wedding and agreed not to use Kayla's marriage against me. I looked at each item without opening any of them. Until that evening, I had collected facts for myself. Now Linda was giving those facts an audience, without giving the audience the facts. I understood what came next. My mother had spent 11 years telling people what my failures meant. That night, she started doing it again. This time, I had the receipts. I did not send anything that Thursday night. That surprised Daniel more than anyone. He came home to find me at the dining table with my laptop open, 4 separate message threads on the screen, and a yellow legal pad covered in dates. I had already written the first version of what I wanted to say to my relatives. It was 3 pages long, angry in places, defensive in others, and full of explanations no one had asked for. By the time Daniel read the first paragraph over my shoulder, I already knew I would delete most of it. "Are you sending that?" he asked. "No." He pulled out the chair beside me. "Good." I gave him a look. "You could pretend to hesitate. You don't need 3 pages to prove 5 facts." That was exactly the problem. For most of my life, when my family misunderstood me, I had chosen one of 2 responses. I either explained myself until I was exhausted or left without explaining at all. Linda benefited from both. If I argued too much, she called me defensive. If I said nothing, she filled the silence. I needed a third option. I closed the document and opened a blank one. "I don't want to convince everyone to like me," I said. "Then don't." I don't want to convince them Kayla is evil either. Then don't. I want them to know what happened before Mom tells them what it meant. Daniel nodded. That sounds shorter. It was. I started with dates. Late summer, 2015. Kayla contacted Evan before our wedding and sent him a photograph from a group work dinner, along with concerns about my commitment. Then, I attached the relevant section of Kayla's email. Not the entire thread. Just enough to show the photograph, her description of me, and the line about always needing a way out. Next came Linda's email exchange with Evan. Again, I used only the relevant portion. I did not claim my mother told him to leave me because she had not. I wrote exactly what I could prove. Evan contacted Linda after Kayla raised concerns, and Linda reinforced his belief that I made major decisions independently and sometimes failed to understand how that affected partners. For Craig, I wrote less. There was no email, no recording, only Evan's memory and my father's current admission that Evan had called him. So I wrote that. Nothing more. Then came Marcus. 2020. Kayla contacted Marcus after learning I was interviewing for a position in Seattle. She told him she thought I was probably taking the job even though I had not received or accepted an offer. I attached the full relevant exchange, including her retreat. Maybe I'm wrong about how far along it is. That line mattered because it showed exactly how the technique worked. Make the stronger claim. Create fear. Then leave yourself an exit. Finally came Daniel. Thursday, May 14th. Kayla contacted him. Friday, May 15th. She met him in person 2 days before our wedding and raised concerns about whether I could sustain commitment. Saturday, May 16th. Connor confronted her. In the group thread, he told her she had promised to tell me. Linda asked everyone to wait until after the wedding. Connor agreed only after making it clear that he would not stay silent if anyone used his marriage to make another comparison at my expense. Linda wrote that nobody planned to do that. Craig agreed. Sunday, May 17th. Linda raised a glass at my wedding and publicly told me I should learn how to keep a husband from Kayla. Craig applauded. Connor stood up. When I reached that sentence, I stopped typing. Daniel read over my shoulder. You're not adding what Kayla told you at the coffee shop? No. Why? Because I promised I wasn't recording her. I can describe the conversation if I ever need to, but this isn't about proving her motive. Good. And I'm not including what Connor said about their marriage. Also good. I looked at the document. It was less than a page. No adjectives. No diagnosis. No line calling my mother manipulative. No sentence accusing Kayla of jealousy. Just a chronology. For some reason, that felt more dangerous than the angry version. By Friday morning, Linda had called at least 4 more relatives. I knew because 2 contacted me directly and another contacted Daniel. My cousin Rachel sent a message saying she did not want to choose sides but thought I should consider whether digging into Kayla's past was worth destroying a 10-year marriage. I answered one question. Did Mom tell you Kayla met Daniel before my wedding? Rachel replied 5 minutes later. She said Kayla had a conversation with him because she was worried. I typed, did she tell you it happened without my knowledge after Daniel told Kayla that anything concerning me should be discussed with me too? There was a long pause. No. I stopped there. A few hours later, Daniel showed me a message from one of my uncles. I hope you can help Sam calm down. Linda says she's spiraling over what Connor said at the wedding. Daniel had replied before showing me. Samantha is calm. Please ask Linda for the full timeline before describing my wife as spiraling. I read it twice. Thank you. I almost wrote more. I'm glad you didn't. So am I. That afternoon, Kayla posted something online. She did not name me. She did not mention the wedding. She posted a photograph of a lake with a quote underneath it. Sometimes loving people means accepting that they may misunderstand your intentions. I know what was in my heart, and I'm learning not to defend myself to people committed to seeing the worst in me. I stared at it longer than I should have. There were already comments. Stay strong. Protect your peace. The people who know you know your heart. My mother had reacted with a heart. I laughed. Daniel looked up from the couch. What? She says she's learning not to defend herself. That seems healthy. She has called half of Central Ohio. He held out his hand. Give me the phone. No. You're going to read comments until one makes you furious. Probably. Then you're going to write something. Possibly. And regret it? Almost certainly. I locked the screen and put the phone face down. I hate when you're useful. I've noticed. I did not respond to Kayla's post. That was the first decision that felt like victory rather than restraint. I had no interest in arguing underneath a photograph of a lake with people who did not know what had happened. Social media was exactly the wrong place to explain 11 years of family history. It rewarded confidence, speed, and simplicity. Linda and Kayla were better at all three when facts were inconvenient, so I waited through the weekend. Not passively. I checked every attachment in my chronology. I made sure dates were visible. I removed one screenshot because it included an unrelated argument between Connor and Kayla that had nothing to do with me. I removed another because Linda had mentioned a relative's medical problem in the same thread. I asked Evan whether he was comfortable with me sharing the specific portion of his old email with relatives who had been told I was inventing the story. He answered that I could use it. I asked Marcus the same thing. He said yes, as long as I did not involve his current personal life. I promised I would not. Daniel offered me his entire Friday thread with Kayla. I used only the messages establishing why she contacted him and the meeting. You can include where I told her to talk to you, he said. I am. And where she said she would. I am. He nodded. By Sunday night, the packet was ready. I still had not decided who would receive it. That required more discipline than creating it. My first impulse was everyone. Every aunt. Every cousin. Every person who had attended the wedding. That would have felt satisfying for approximately an hour and excessive forever. Linda had not spoken to everyone, so neither would I. I made a list of the relatives who had either contacted me directly or whom I had reliable reason to know Linda had contacted. 7 people. Daniel looked at the list. That's it? That's it. What about the family group chat? No. Why? Because then I'm doing what she did, turning everyone into an audience. He smiled slightly. You're getting annoyingly reasonable. I am furious. You can be both. Monday morning, June 1st, I sent the same message to those 7 people. I am sending this only because information about my wedding and my relationship history has been shared with you in a way that leaves out facts directly relevant to what happened. I am not asking you to take sides or contact anyone on my behalf. I am correcting the record once. The attached timeline includes only material I can document or statements people have directly confirmed to me. I will not discuss private details of Kayla and Connor's marriage. Then I attached the chronology. I pressed send 7 times. After the 7th, nothing dramatic happened. No music. No burst of relief. My kitchen stayed quiet. The dishwasher hummed. Daniel had already left for work. I made coffee and sat at the table expecting my phone to explode. It did not. The first response came from Aunt Diane. I read everything. I'm sorry. Your mother did not tell me any of this. I answered. Thank you for reading it. Nothing more. Rachel responded next. I had no idea Kayla contacted Evan too. Mom made it sound like this started with Connor at the reception. I corrected one word before answering. This did not start with Connor. He reacted to something already happening. Then I stopped. By lunch, 2 more relatives had acknowledged receiving it. One did not reply at all. That was fine. I had not sent it to collect votes. The most revealing reaction came from Uncle Paul, my mother's older brother. He called instead of texting. Sam, I read what you sent. Okay. I want to make sure I understand something. Ask. Your mother knew Saturday that Kayla had met Daniel? Yes. And she agreed nobody would compare your marriages at the wedding? The group thread is attached. I saw it. He was quiet. Then he asked, why would she make that toast? I looked out the window. That is a question for her. Paul exhaled slowly. Fair enough. He did not tell me he supported me. He did not condemn my mother. He simply stopped accepting her version without questions. That was enough. The calls to Linda started sometime that afternoon. I knew because at 3:17 she sent me a message. What have you done? I stared at it. For a woman who had spent the previous 4 days contacting relatives, the question was impressive. I did not answer. 3 minutes later, another message arrived. Your aunt just called me accusing me of lying. Still no answer. Then, you sent private family communications to people without asking me. I almost responded to that one. Almost. Instead, I opened the chronology and checked whether anything I had sent belonged solely to Linda. Her email to Evan had been sent to Evan. The Saturday group thread included Connor and Kayla. My own conversations belonged to me. I had not shared her private medical information, finances, or unrelated family details. So I left the message alone. At 4, Craig called. I answered because, unlike my mother, he had not yet contacted me since the packet went out. What did you send everyone? He asked. The same information Mom was discussing with them, except with dates and screenshots. You had no right to embarrass your mother. I leaned back in my chair. Did she have the right to tell them I was trying to destroy Kayla's marriage? That's not what she said. Rachel used those words after speaking with her. You know how people paraphrase things. Yes, that is why I sent the original material. He went quiet. I continued before he could redirect. I sent it only to people who had already been pulled into this. That doesn't make it right. It makes it necessary. Necessary? Samantha, none of this needed to leave the family. Mom took it outside the family. She was looking for support. So was Kayla when she contacted Evan. Craig stopped. It was not a perfect comparison. I knew that, but it was close enough that he heard the problem. This is getting vindictive, he said. No. Vindictive would have been sending it to every wedding guest and posting it online. You considered that? For about 30 seconds. He sighed. At least you're honest. I am being very careful about honesty. You've made your point. Good. So stop. I already did. He seemed confused. What? I sent one correction. I'm not calling anyone. I'm not posting anything. I'm not asking people to confront Mom or Kayla. Then tell Diane to stop calling your mother. No. Sam, I didn't send Diane to do anything. What she does with information is her choice. You know this is tearing everyone apart. There it was. Not what Kayla did. Not what Linda hid. Not what Craig had allowed. The truth was tearing everyone apart. Dad, people asking Mom questions is not the same as me attacking her. She is extremely upset. I was extremely upset at 27. That was different. How? He could not answer. I waited long enough to give him the chance. Finally, he said, You were always stronger than Kayla. My hand tightened around the phone. The sentence landed so softly that for a second I almost missed what he had admitted. Not that Kayla was right. Not that I had deserved less. That I had been chosen to carry more because they believed I could. What does that have to do with telling me the truth? I asked. Craig sighed. This is what I mean. You turn everything into an accusation. No, I'm asking you to finish the thought. What thought? You said I was stronger than Kayla. Finish the sentence. I don't want to fight. Neither do I. Then let this go. I closed my eyes. For years, my father had treated letting something go as a moral virtue, provided the thing being released belonged to someone else. I sent the facts once, I said. I'm done explaining them. Good. But I'm not taking them back. Craig did not answer. Before I could end the call, he said quietly, Your mother wants you to come over tomorrow. Why? She thinks the 4 of us need to talk before this gets worse. The 4 of us? You, me, your mother, Kayla. I almost laughed at how familiar the arrangement sounded. What exactly does Mom think can get worse? She thinks you're cutting the family apart. No, I think she wants me in a room where she can make that argument without screenshots interrupting her. That is unfair. Maybe. I looked at the legal pad still sitting beside my laptop. Dates, messages, names. 11 years reduced to facts my parents could no longer rearrange without resistance. I'll come, I said. Craig sounded relieved. Then I added, But this time I'm not coming to ask what happened. I already know. The relief disappeared. I ended the call and sat quietly for a minute. The first meeting had been about evidence. The second would be about something harder. Why the daughter they called strong had always been the one expected to absorb the damage. The next afternoon, I drove back to my parents' house knowing exactly what I was willing to discuss and exactly what I was not. Craig had asked for one more conversation, and I had agreed because I wanted one thing I had not gotten from either parent yet. An answer that did not hide behind Kayla, good intentions, or the phrase family is complicated. Linda was waiting in the living room when I arrived, even though Craig had originally said he wanted to speak with me himself. I looked from her to him and said, "Fine, both of you can stay. But if either of you starts arguing with screenshots or telling me what somebody else meant, I'm leaving." Linda folded her arms. "You really think you can set rules for talking to your own parents now?" I put my purse beside the chair but did not sit yet. I can set rules for any conversation I'm part of. Craig sighed and asked us both not to start fighting before we had even begun, which was so perfectly him that I almost laughed. He had spent years treating the first raised voice as the beginning of a problem instead of asking what had happened before anyone raised it. I sat down and let Craig speak first. He said my chronology had embarrassed Linda, confused relatives, and made Kayla's marriage problems worse. He admitted the information was real, then immediately followed it with, "But we all handled things badly." I stopped him there. "No, we are not doing we all. Tell me what you did." His face tightened, and I could see how much he wanted to move the conversation back into the safety of shared blame. "Samantha, I already admitted Evan called me. That isn't all you did." He looked at the floor for a moment. "After your mother told me what Kayla had done, I should have told you." I waited, and when he realized I was not going to rescue him from the silence, he continued. He said, "I was already devastated. Kayla was terrified. Linda believed telling me would tear the family apart, and he decided there was nothing to gain by reopening the engagement after Evan had left. So I let it go," he finished. "You didn't let it go," I said. "You decided I would carry it." Craig looked up sharply, but I kept my voice level. Kayla got to keep being my sister without telling me what she did. Mom got to keep protecting her. You got your quiet house. I got to spend 11 years believing the breakup proved something about my character. He started to say that was not what he intended, and I shook my head. "I know, intentions are not the question anymore." Linda stood and walked toward the window. "You were always stronger than she was." I had heard versions of that sentence my whole life, usually disguised as praise. "Samantha can handle it. Samantha will figure it out. Samantha doesn't need as much reassurance." This time, I asked the question I had never asked when I was younger. Why did being stronger mean I deserved less protection? "It didn't," Linda said quickly. "That is not what I said." "Then explain what it meant." She turned toward me, already frustrated. "Kayla fell apart after Evan left you. She was crying, panicking, saying you would never forgive her. I was afraid of what she might do to herself emotionally if everything exploded at once." She paused, then added, "You were hurt, but you were functioning. You went to work. You handled canceling things. You kept moving." I stared at her because she still could not hear how terrible her own explanation sounded. So, because I could make phone calls, I needed my mother less? No. Because I could return deposits, I needed the truth less? That isn't what I mean. Then what do you mean? Linda's eyes filled. "We knew you'd survive it." The room became completely still. Craig looked at his hands. Linda looked at me as if she had finally said the sentence that should make me understand. And maybe that was the saddest part. Somewhere inside her, my ability to survive had become permission to give me more to survive. I felt tears burn behind my eyes, but I did not look away. "When exactly was I allowed to need parents too?" Linda's mouth opened, then closed. I thought about being 27 in an apartment full of canceled plans, while my mother knew my sister had interfered and still told me maybe the breakup proved I was not ready. I thought about every family dinner where my resilience had been used as evidence that I required less care. Was there an age? I asked. A crisis bad enough? Did I have to stop functioning before one of you decided I deserved the same protection you kept giving Kayla? Craig said my name quietly. I turned to him. "You don't get to comfort me out of the question." He nodded once, And for the first time, I saw him do something I had wanted from him for years. He stayed inside the discomfort instead of trying to smooth it away. There wasn't an excuse, he said. I knew enough to know you deserved the truth. And I chose quiet because I thought you'd get over it. I wiped my cheek with the back of my hand. Thank you. Linda looked almost offended by the response, but I meant it. The admission did not repair anything, yet it was the first honest sentence Craig had offered that did not spread responsibility across the entire room. He had chosen silence. Linda had chosen protection for Kayla. Kayla had chosen interference. I had made mistakes in my old relationships, but I was done carrying their decisions inside the same box as mine. Linda sat down again. So what now? How long are you planning to punish us? I had expected that question, and because I had expected it, I did not answer from anger. This isn't punishment. Punishment would be me trying to make your life painful until I felt better. I'm deciding what access you get to mine. She frowned as if access were a word that belonged to passwords rather than families. For the foreseeable future, I don't want calls, visits, or messages from you unless I initiate them. I told her, if there is a genuine emergency, Dad can contact me. If you send some practical question that crosses the boundary, I may answer once to restate it, but that does not reopen communication. Linda stared at me. You're cutting your mother off. I shook my head. I'm stopping the assumption that being my mother means you can enter any part of my life whenever you want. I turned to Craig. You can text or email occasionally, but don't carry messages from Mom. Don't give me updates designed to make me feel guilty. Don't ask Daniel to mediate. If I find out something I tell you is being passed around the family, that changes too. He nodded slowly. Linda said this was cruel, and Craig finally did something that surprised me. He did not tell me to reconsider. He only said, I understand. Kayla messaged me 2 days later. Connor had moved into a short-term rental, and according to her, that proved I had gotten exactly what I wanted. I read the message twice before answering, because I wanted to make sure I was not secretly pleased enough to lie to myself. There was satisfaction in knowing she could no longer stand behind the image she had used against me, but I had never asked Connor to leave her. Their marriage was not mine to punish or save. I wrote, I didn't ask Connor to leave you. I stopped helping you hide what you did to me. What happens between you and him belongs to the two of you, she answered almost immediately, asking whether I understood that I had destroyed 10 years of her life. I told her Connor had already made it clear his decision was about trust inside their marriage, not about my packet, and I would not accept responsibility for his choice any more than I would erase hers. Her next message was shorter. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I sat with that question longer than any accusation she had sent. A younger version of me might have answered yes because family was supposed to leave every door unlocked, or no because anger felt clearer than uncertainty. Instead, I wrote the only honest thing I had. I don't know, and you don't get to make that my next responsibility. I muted her after that. A week later, my cousin Rachel texted to ask how I was doing. Near the end of the conversation, she mentioned that the usual Sunday gathering at my parents' house had not happened, and that things there had become really quiet. I did not ask for details. Whatever arguments were happening inside that house belonged to the people having them, and I had spent enough years being made responsible for everyone's emotional temperature. Still, the word stayed with me, quiet. That was what Craig had always wanted. Do not make things worse. Let it go. Keep the family together. He had finally gotten the quiet he had protected for years, except now it came from distance instead of peace. I did not feel triumphant. Some evenings I felt grief so suddenly that I would be washing a plate or folding laundry and have to stop because I remembered that my parents were still alive 20 minutes away and I had chosen not to speak to my mother. Daniel never tried to talk me out of it. He understood that relief and grief could occupy the same room without canceling each other out. 3 weeks passed. Daniel and I settled back into the townhouse that had been ours before the wedding, opened the last boxes, returned to work routines, and slowly built days that were not organized around my family. One evening, while we were making dinner, my phone lit up on the kitchen counter with a message from Linda. I almost ignored it until I saw the preview. When do I get my spare key? I stared at my mother's message for a long time before answering. 3 weeks earlier, the question would have made me furious. Linda had sat across from me while I told her clearly that she would not have unscheduled access to our home, and that I did not want calls, visits, or messages unless I initiated them. Somehow she had treated 3 weeks of silence like a cooling-off period. In her mind, boundaries were emotional weather. You waited until the storm passed, then returned to the old road. Daniel glanced over from the cutting board. You don't have to respond. I know. Do you want to? Yes. Once. That had become my rule. One false claim got one factual correction. One boundary test got one clear response. After that, silence was not avoidance. It was enforcement. I typed slowly. You will not be getting a key. I already told you that I don't want anyone having automatic or unscheduled access to our home. That has not changed. I also asked you not to contact me unless I initiate it. I'm answering this once so there is no misunderstanding. Please respect that boundary. Linda responded almost immediately. I am your mother, Samantha. Families do not treat each other like strangers. The old me would have taken the bait. I would have explained that I had never called her a stranger, written paragraphs about trust and privacy, then watched her pick one sentence and turn it into the new argument. Or I would have blocked her without answering and spent days wondering what version of my silence she was telling everyone. Instead, I muted the conversation. Daniel waited until I put my phone face down. Done? Done. For real? For real. He went back to the cutting board. Good, because I think I'm burning the onions while respecting your autonomy. I smelled the pan and laughed. You are definitely burning the onions. That was how the first boundary violation ended. No explosion, no family meeting. I corrected it once and went back to dinner. I had spent years thinking boundaries required either conflict or escape. I was finally learning they could also become ordinary. A few days later, Aunt Diane called. She promised immediately that she was not calling on Linda's behalf. My mother had contacted her again and tried to explain that the screenshots I sent looked worse without the emotional context of our family. According to Linda, private conversations were being interpreted too literally. What did you say? I asked. I told her, Linda, I've already read the messages. I closed my eyes. For years, my mother's strongest weapon had not been lying. It had been interpretation. She got to people first and explained what things meant. If I left Thanksgiving after asking her twice to stop comparing me to Kayla, Linda told relatives I had become upset over an innocent comment. If one of my relationships failed, she explained that independence made intimacy difficult for me. When Connor stood up at my wedding, she tried immediately to make his behavior the issue, before anyone could ask why he had stood. Now Diane had already seen the source material. Linda could still explain herself. She simply could not decide what Diane had seen. She kept telling me I didn't understand what she meant, Diane continued. I told her I wasn't asking her to explain you anymore. That sentence stayed with me. Then Diane surprised me. I owe you an apology. For what? For believing some things about you because Linda always sounded so certain. I felt something tighten in my chest. You don't have to list them. I wasn't going to. I just should have asked you more questions over the years. Thank you. Before we hung up, I asked her not to become my source for everything happening at my parents' house. I did not want weekly reports about whether Linda was crying or Craig was miserable. Distance would mean nothing if I spent every day checking whether it hurt the people on the other side. Connor contacted me near the end of June. His message said he and Kayla were still living separately and that he had spoken with a divorce attorney to understand his options. He did not mention money, property, or anything else private between them. He only wanted to correct one thing because Kayla had apparently told him that I had destroyed their marriage. I called him that evening. You don't have to explain your marriage to me. I know. I'm not going to. Good. But what Kayla told you wasn't fair. She told me I destroyed 10 years of her life. I know. His voice sounded tired, but steadier than it had after the wedding. I didn't move out because you sent that timeline, he said. The timeline showed me things I didn't know. That's different. What made you leave? When I started asking her about us, I stayed quiet. She kept making the problem about your wedding. Then your mother. Then you contacting Evan and Marcus. Every time I asked why she hid Friday from me until Daniel contacted me, she talked about somebody else's behavior. That sounds familiar. I asked whether she'd ever talked to other people about problems in our marriage before talking to me. Then I asked whether she had presented us as happier than we were because she wanted your family to keep seeing us a certain way. What did she say? She said she didn't want your mother worrying. I remembered Connor describing how Linda had called them the steady couple for years. So what did that tell you? That there were 3 people in my marriage. Me, Kayla, and the version of our marriage she needed Linda to believe in. There was no satisfaction in hearing it. And you're filing? Yes. My attorney is preparing the paperwork. Nothing's final. Not even close. Good. I did not want the story to turn into the ridiculous version where Connor discovered one secret at a wedding and was somehow divorced a week later. What happened between him and Kayla had been building inside their own marriage. My evidence had forced him to look at it, not created it. I am not leaving because Kayla hurt you, Connor said. I'm leaving because I don't trust how she handles truth inside our marriage. That distinction mattered. I'm sorry it came to this. Thanks. And I'm staying out of what happens next. I was hoping you'd say that. I ended the call without asking who would get the house or what Kayla planned to do. Curiosity did not give me permission to insert myself into their marriage just because she had once inserted herself into mine. Kayla emailed me in early July. The subject line read, "I understand something now." I did not open it immediately. That was another change. Family messages were no longer emergencies simply because they arrived. When I finally read it, Kayla explained that Linda had started pressuring her to save the marriage before Connor made anything permanent. Mom kept bringing up their 10-year anniversary, the wedding toast, and how humiliating it would look if the marriage everyone had praised collapsed immediately afterward. Then Kayla wrote something I had not expected. Mom keeps talking about my marriage like it belongs to the family. I read the sentence twice. For years, Kayla had benefited from that ownership. Her marriage was the Harris family trophy. It proved Kayla understood compromise, that Linda understood relationships, and that I was the daughter who did not know how to stay. Now the trophy was cracking, and Kayla was learning that being the favorite did not mean being free. It meant being rewarded for performing the assigned role. She wrote that when she told Linda she did not know whether Connor would ever trust her again. Our mother asked what relatives would think if they divorced. Kayla said it was the first time she realized Mom seemed more frightened by the meaning of the divorce than by the fact that her daughter was hurting. I felt sympathy. Then I stopped myself from turning sympathy into responsibility. The old version of me would have explained Linda to her. I would have mapped the family system, shown Kayla how favoritism worked, maybe even helped her build a new identity, because once I understood a problem, I always wanted to solve it. But Kayla was 35. Understanding our mother was her work now. I wrote back one paragraph. I'm glad you can see that your marriage belongs to you and Connor, not Mom and not the family. What you do with that understanding is your responsibility. I am not ready to rebuild a relationship with you. I need you to continue respecting that. Several hours later, she replied, I will. No justification, no question about forgiveness, no request that I speak to Connor. For the first time since the wedding, she accepted a boundary without trying to negotiate what it meant. I did not mistake one correct action for redemption. I simply let it be one correct action. Craig contacted me twice during July. The first message was practical. An older relative was worried that a wedding gift had gone missing. We had received it, so I answered him. The second came on the 2-month anniversary of our wedding. Hope you and Daniel are doing well. No need to answer. Just thinking about you. I read the final line twice. No need to answer. My father had spent most of my life treating silence like a problem that needed immediate repair. Now he was learning that contacting me did not entitle him to a response. I answered anyway. We're doing well, thank you. Near the end of July, he asked whether I would have lunch with him. My first instinct was no. I could already hear the conversation I feared. Your mother is suffering. Kayla is struggling. Thanksgiving will be awkward. Can't we put this behind us? Then I reminded myself that a boundary was not a performance of hardness. I had told Craig he could contact me if he respected the conditions I set. So far, he had. I agreed. We met at a casual restaurant halfway between his neighborhood and ours. He looked older than he had at the wedding. Not dramatically, just more tired around the eyes. We spent the first 20 minutes discussing safe things. Work, road construction, Daniel's hopeless attempt to keep a basil plant alive. For a while, we sounded like a father and daughter having lunch instead of two people testing whether they still knew how to have a relationship. Then Craig put down his fork. Your mother says the house is too quiet. I looked at him. He raised one hand immediately. I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty. Good. I know how it sounds. Then why tell me? Because I think I finally understand why it matters. I waited. All those years I thought quiet meant I was doing my job. If your mother and you were arguing, I tried to stop the argument. If Kayla was upset and you weren't, I dealt with Kayla because she seemed like the emergency. If your mother wanted everyone to calm down, I usually asked whoever seemed calmer to give a little. That was usually me. Yes, because I could handle it. Yes, the same reason Mom gave. I know. He rubbed one thumb along the edge of his glass. I realized asking the person who can take more pain to take more pain isn't neutrality. That was the closest my father had ever come to naming the whole system himself. I told myself I wasn't choosing sides, he continued. I thought choosing peace meant I was refusing to choose. But you were choosing. Yes. No argument this time. You were choosing whoever was most likely to keep the room quiet. Yes. And that usually meant Mom and Kayla got accommodated. Yes. I let the silence stay there. When Evan left, Craig said, I thought you would recover. I did. That doesn't make what we did right. No. I should have told you as soon as I learned what Kayla had done. And if Mom told you not to, I should have told you anyway. The answer came quickly. What about my wedding? He looked down. I shouldn't have clapped. It was such a small action for something that had carried so much meaning. Why did you? Habit. I stared at him. Linda made the toast. Everyone was looking. For a second, I just went along with the room. I knew about Friday, but I still did what I always did. You agreed in writing that nobody would use Kayla's marriage against me. I know. Connor remembered. He did. That's why he stood. Craig nodded. I blamed him at first because standing made everything public. It took me too long to understand your mother had already broken the agreement in public. For once, he reached the conclusion without me dragging him there. I am sorry, he said. I believe you. His eyes lifted. But we're not going back to normal. I know. Normal was everyone assuming I'd eventually absorb whatever happened. He nodded. And I don't know what our relationship looks like yet. I know that too. Hearing him say it without asking me to hurry felt like progress. I did not forgive him in one grand moment over lunch. I did not promise Thanksgiving or unrestricted visits. I let one honest conversation remain one honest conversation. By early August, almost 3 months had passed since the wedding. Connor had filed for divorce. Nothing was final. Kayla had moved into a small apartment while attorneys handled the practical pieces. I knew little beyond that, exactly as I wanted it. Some relatives stopped accepting Linda's explanations without questions. Nobody staged a family revolt. Nobody publicly humiliated her. Her consequence was quieter. She lost authority. When she said I was punishing Kayla, people asked whether Kayla had contacted Daniel before the wedding. When she blamed Connor for the reception, someone remembered the Saturday thread. When she said I had taken private family matters outside the family, someone remembered that she had started calling relatives first. For a woman who had spent decades deciding what events meant, having people verify before believing her was enough, my consequence was different. I had to accept that finding the truth did not make the past painless. Sometimes, I still thought about being 27 and wondered whether Evan and I would have married if Kayla had never written that email. Maybe we would have. Maybe we would have divorced anyway. Maybe my habit of making decisions alone would have worn him down. Maybe we would have grown together. There was no evidence for any answer, so I stopped trying to manufacture one. The truth was not that Kayla stole my destiny. The truth was that she interfered with my choices. My parents concealed it. Evan made his own decision, and I spent years carrying blame that did not all belong to me. That was enough. Daniel and I had our own problems because every real marriage does. He hated that I stacked unopened mail on the kitchen counter. I hated that he considered, "I'll do it this weekend," an acceptable long-term repair schedule. We disagreed about money in small ways, and schedules in larger ones. The difference was that when something mattered, we tried to discuss it before deciding what the other person could handle. In August, my company asked whether I could take a 3-day trip to Chicago. 5 years earlier, I might have accepted first and mentioned it to Daniel later. I opened the reply email, then stopped. I called him. "Do we have anything the week of the 17th? He laughed. "Hello to you too." "Hello? Do we?" "I don't think so. Why?" "Chicago project meeting. 3 days. I want to take it." "Okay." That wasn't permission. I know. I am involving you in the process. I can hear how painful this is. Do not ruin my growth. We checked the calendar. His sister might visit that weekend, but nothing was confirmed. We decided I would take the trip and he would check with her before making other plans. 5 minutes. No sacrifice. No permission. Just inclusion. Afterward, I thought about Marcus. He had not been wrong to want that from me. I had been wrong to treat involvement as intrusion. That mistake belonged to me. I could admit it without allowing Kayla to use it as justification for manipulating him. That distinction became one of the most important things I learned. You do not need to be innocent of every flaw to deserve honesty. You do not need to be the perfect daughter to deserve protection. And somebody else's wrongdoing does not erase responsibility for the mistakes that really are yours. One evening in early August, Linda sent me another message. "We are still your family." I stared at it. Some part of me still loved the idea behind those words. Parents who had known me since birth. A sister whose childhood photographs were mixed with mine in boxes I would probably carry through every home I ever owned. Holidays and traditions built before any of us understood how much damage people could do while believing they were protecting one another. I was not rejecting all of that. I was rejecting the conclusion Linda attached to it. I answered, "Being family gave you a place in my life. It never gave you ownership of it." She replied that she had never wanted to own me. I did not answer. She might even have believed that. Ownership does not always feel like ownership to the person exercising it. Sometimes it feels like concern, access, advice, a spare key for emergencies, a phone call to a fiancé because he deserves to know something, a decision not to tell a daughter the truth because she is strong enough to survive without it. I muted her again. That Sunday evening, Daniel and I ate dinner at the little table near our kitchen window. Nothing important was happening. Pasta, salad, 2 glasses of wine, and an argument about whether the new basil plant he had bought was dying after only 2 days. The townhouse was quiet. Not Craig's kind of quiet. Not the silence created by everyone swallowing whatever might cause trouble. Ordinary quiet. Forks against plates. Traffic outside. The refrigerator humming behind us. My phone lit up beside my plate. Linda. I looked at the name. For years, seeing my mother's call had triggered an immediate calculation. If I ignored her, she would worry. If she worried, Craig would call. If Craig called, I would sound irritated. Then, Linda would tell Kayla I was shutting everyone out again. I had spent half my life responding not to what I wanted but to the chain of reactions I expected from everyone else. That night, I did not calculate any of it. Daniel saw the screen. He did not ask whether I was going to answer. He kept eating. I picked up the phone, looked at my mother's name for another second, then turned it face down. Daniel pointed toward the windowsill. "I think the basil is dying. You bought it 2 days ago. It looks judgmental. You put it directly over the air vent. You said basil likes fresh air. I said sunlight. Related concepts. They absolutely are not." He reached toward the pot. I slapped his hand away. He laughed. I did too. Somewhere 20 minutes away, my parents were living with the quiet they had created. Somewhere else, Kayla was learning who she was when she could no longer use a 10-year marriage as proof that she understood relationships better than I did. Connor was beginning a divorce that belonged to him. Evan and Marcus had returned to their own lives after giving me the answers they could give. They all had consequences. Kayla lost the marriage she had used as a scoreboard, but she lost it because of the way she handled trust inside that marriage. Linda lost her ability to define everyone else's version of events and, more importantly, her automatic access to my life. Craig got the quiet he had protected for years and learned that peace created through one person's silence was not peace. But none of those things were my victory. My victory was smaller. I no longer needed them to suffer before I believed I had been wronged. I no longer needed every relative to agree with me before I trusted what I had seen. I no longer needed to carry Kayla's insecurity as evidence that I had somehow provoked her, Linda's favoritism as proof that I had been too difficult to love, or Craig's silence as a reason to wonder whether what happened was serious enough to matter. And I no longer needed to make myself flawless before I allowed myself to be angry. I had made mistakes with Evan. I had made mistakes with Marcus. I would make mistakes with Daniel. Those belonged to me. Kayla's choices belonged to Kayla. My mother's choices belonged to her. My father's silence belonged to him. For years, they had handed me the consequences of decisions I never made and then praised me for being strong enough to carry them. That was the part that ended. My phone stopped ringing. No second call came. Maybe Linda was learning. Maybe she was only waiting. For once, I did not need to know. Daniel moved the basil plant away from the vent and looked pleased with himself. "You're making it worse," I told him. "You said it needed sunlight. The window is over there. This is closer, by 6 inches. Growth happens gradually." I stared at him. Was that supposed to be profound? Maybe. It wasn't. He smiled and returned to dinner. I picked up my wine glass and listened as he finished telling me about his day. The phone remained face down between us. I did not feel guilty. I did not feel triumphant. I felt free enough to stay where I was. For most of my adult life, my family had described me as the woman who always needed an exit. They had been wrong about that too. I had never been afraid of staying. I had just spent too much time in rooms where other people decided what I was supposed to carry. This time, I wasn't running from anything. I was choosing what I would stay for. You can love your family without giving them unlimited access to your life. Admit your own mistakes, but do not carry consequences created by someone else's lies, silence, or manipulation. Set clear boundaries, correct false stories with facts, and protect healthy relationships. Subscribe for more family stories about accountability, courage, and self-respect.